Welcome to Weird Games and Weirder People, a podcast about role-playing games and the weird, wonderful people behind them. Hello, Weirdos! This is Diogo Nogueira, and this is the last episode of 2023. This week and the next one, we're only gonna have one episode because, holiday season, you have to do all the stuff, kind of busy, but I still have to remind you that we have an excellent bundle of holding going on right now. It's for Blades in the Dark. We have Blades in the Dark, we have Cosmosaurus, we have Court of Blades, we have so many other games. And if you get the bundle of holding, you help out the Diana George Award, who supports up-and-coming names in the tabletop RPG industry. And we also like to remind you that we do have a Discord server for the weirdos that listen to this episode and just want to hang out, so check out the show notes for the links. And for this week's guest, we have Yochai Gal, creator of Cairn, co-host of the Between Two Cairns podcast. We talked about many great things. We talked about weather, like two old people, we talked about passing time, how he identifies himself as an existentialist, the importance of letting things go, about the process of doing the podcast Between Two Cairns. We mentioned Seinfeld, which is a highlight for me because I love Seinfeld. We talked about his gaming process, campaigns. We talked about how hippopotamus are really much dangerous than sharks. We talked about the Filmcast podcast. We talked about Chris McDowell, his influence, game design principles, video game experiences like Other Rides and Breath of the Wild. We talked about how do we bet with our phone for focus, how we like to explore the idea of time travel. We even have an idea on the show about a game using time travel that's very interesting. We talked about his journey and issues with his spirituality and religion. We talked about many great things. We get personal, we go deep, and we get weird. So I hope you enjoy it. So let's get weird with Yochai Gal. Hello, Yochai. Thanks for coming to Weird Games and Weirder People. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm really a fan of your work, everything that you do. I'm excited to see Cairn 2nd edition coming soon. But first of all, how have you been, my friend?
I've been really great. I as I was telling you before we started recording, it's winter here in North America, so I have been sick and my kid has been sick, and it's been difficult to arrange this. So I really appreciate your flexibility, and I've been listening to your show, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm super excited to be here and glad you have been listening to this. It's some weird conversations, but we have been having a lot of fun. And but talking about the weather here, does it snow where you live?
It does snow. It doesn't really obey any logic. It will snow sometimes on Halloween, which is at the end of October, or it will snow in January. It just doesn't really, it doesn't pay attention to any rules. But it does get cold. That is the one constant, is it gets really cold and it stays that way, and everything starts to die, and the forest around my house becomes quite barren, but it's beautiful in its own way. And then when it does snow, it's sort of a nice clean atmosphere and landscape for about 2 hours until turns to mud. But yeah, I've learned to like it. I used to have a really hard time with it, but now I just know to put on the right amount of layers, and then
I imagine. I don't live in an environment like this, so I was talking to you how you think it's too cold, and for me, I was like, oh, that's gonna be a nice relief from the 48 Celsius that we face here. But one thing that's
too hot.
That's
too hot.
Yeah, one thing that makes me think a place like this it's kind of interesting is, as you said, like after winter everything dies, so you see like this cycle of life. You see spring, everything comes back into life, and summer it's on the top of its game and then start dying, and then autumn comes and all these colors, and then come winter. So it's such a variety. And here in Brazil it's basically hot all year, so it's basically the same everything. You don't see this change so visible to us. sometimes it gets too hot and then the trees die because it's too hot, but we don't have like market seasons, at least here in Rio. As you can see, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. It's all like it's summer, high summer, summer, and low summer, basically.
Yeah, I've in when I was living in San Francisco in California, there was the similar situation where the weather didn't really change much. It was just cloudy most of the year, and then you'd get a few days of summer late in the summer, and then it would just be cloudy again. And what I noticed about that is that people were very unmoored from time there. They didn't have a sense of the passing of seasons, and it was even more felt because it's so hard to raise kids there that to even afford to have kids there. That when people would have kids, they
Yeah,
would usually leave the city, and so the cycle was basically live there and be young forever, which doesn't actually appeal
yeah,
to me. And there is this idea in science fiction, especially that, immortality and being youthful forever. And that sounds like a nightmare to me. I like the
yeah,
changing of seasons and the changing of life. And I that's one thing I do appreciate, despite how cold it is here. Let me just say, I miss in Israel. It gets 50 degrees centigrade too, and it's too much. But
yeah,
I do appreciate now knowing what time of year it is just by the smell outside. I just can smell the air and I know what time of year it is. And that's something I never had before in California or in Israel. So, yeah, I've learned to appreciate it despite the fact that winter sometimes lasts
yeah.
6 months here. It really feels that way.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I have to imagine that's kind of better, for mental health because you have this variety. And I was wondering, do you feel your mood change with the seasons? Because we always hear about people that live in London, for example. It's kind of depressing because it's always cloudy. And do you feel like your disposition changing throughout the seasons, or
It
it was
used to be,
different as you lived in
yeah,
Israel or California? Do you feel
yeah,
this?
I definitely feel like in the not based on season but based on weather, my mood will change. Sometimes cloudy days will depress me, but here I've learned to really enjoy them because even when it's cloudy, it's still very green and verdant in the spring and summer. In California, things, except for very small pockets of time, things are very brown there, and it's the same in Israel. Things are very brown most of the year, brown and yellow. Those colors depress the hell out of me. But
Yeah,
in New England, things get brown in the fall, and fall is a time for indoors, board games, food,
yeah,
festivals. So I actually see again, living in New England, one thing I do appreciate is that when it is cloudy and gloomy, it's usually extremely green and wet outside because it's so wet here that things get green. But when it's
yeah,
cloudy in the fall and winter, that reminds me of home and hearth, of being close to people and playing games. And I'm not being poetic. I really feel that way. In California, it was not that way because first off, it would rarely get gloomy for long enough for me to feel a sense of connection with it. And then second, when it was gloomy outside, it was also dead and brown and yellow. And I just thought those colors would depress me. So I do understand what you mean, but I don't feel it here. I feel a sense of community and connection in those times.
that's great. That's awesome.
so so sentimental.
Yeah. Well, Yokai, before we go on, I would like to ask you to tell the weirdos out there that listen to us, in your own words, who Yokai is, what do you do, and if you can, share a small detail about yourself, some habits you might have that people would say, yeah, yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, sure. So this I've been thinking about this part. So my name is Yochai. I am a game designer, I guess, and I
Sorry for
also write.
butchering your name. Yeah, Yohai.
Oh, everybody does.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sure I butcher yours all the time. So, that's part of the game, I guess. I am. uh, I live in Massachusetts in the United States, and I'm originally from Israel. I do some board game. I mean, some role playing game design. I also do a little bit of board game design, but none of that is public. And I also write adventures occasionally. I think I'm probably best known for the RPG Cairn, which is just a ripoff of Knave and Into the Odd with some of my own tweaks. And I do have a second edition of the game coming out next year that is a bit more yochai. I think it's a bit more. It has a lot of unique aspects to it that I actually think aren't. I think they are pretty original. I hope, in the sense that I didn't really take them from anywhere. I came up with them mostly on my own and in conversations with friends. I'm sure they've been done before, but at least I didn't crib off anyone this time. As for something weird that I do, I only eat between 11 and 7 every day. And it helps me control my diet. So right now, for example, I haven't eaten yet. It's 8 a.m. My time. I have not eaten yet, and I will not eat. Usually, I don't eat until 12:30 because of just the way meetings at work. But I consider myself highly regimented around a lot of those things. I am a kind of a, I guess you'd call me an existentialist to some degree, or maybe a solipsist. I'm very much live for my own pleasures, and my life is a constant battle with that. So one way to mitigate that lack of control is to have a regimented lifestyle. So every day I wake up, I do my exercises in the morning. I don't eat until 11. I stop eating at 7. Just those little things, which
Yeah.
other folks might call a bit obsessive. They really help me maintain focus. I feel
Yeah.
like if
Well.
you can control one thing in your life, you can control everything in your life. And
Yeah.
that's for the same reason I was vegan for 8 years. As you know, I wanted to maintain a sense of control over my diet, and that had its own negative side effects. So I'm back to being a vegetarian. But yeah, so that's I hope that was a weird enough answer.
Yeah, it's weird because not everybody does that, but I think it's kind of healthy too because when we know ourselves, and I do that too, not necessarily with food and stuff, but I try to create rules, to control my own self, instincts because we know ourselves. Sometimes we do stuff that we shouldn't. So when we create those stuffs to help us be the better selves that we can be, right?
Yeah, and I think for each person it's a different challenge.
Yeah,
Everyone's sort
of
of
course.
fighting their own battles, and
Yeah.
mine is around food and other things like that. I if anyone ever asks me about it, my big warning is just try not to overeat because you're afraid you're running out of time. You just have to accept that you have to kind of let
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
I was when I was a younger man, I traveled a lot. I traveled throughout Europe and North Africa and West Africa, and I noticed something about myself. I was in my early 20s, and I was taking a taxi brousse, which is like a taxi in Morocco that you can pay money to have a seat in the car, and then you just happen to be going from one city to the other. You can't say take me to this place. You just take a city from Marrakesh to Dakhla or
Yeah.
something. But anyways, I noticed the drivers of this car, there's two guys, they were smoking constantly in the car, and I normally absolutely hate cigarettes. The smell of them, everything to do with it, I detest smoking on every level, always have. And I noticed that because I was in, the Western Sahara, and I was completely out of my element. I spoke French and Spanish, but I can't speak Arabic. So I was woefully unprepared. When I remember being in the car with them, and I didn't care that they were smoking. And I realized the reason I didn't care is because I didn't have any control. I had completely let go of control, and somehow that clicked for me later.
Yeah.
Was if you let go of control, you stop caring as much. And I don't know if that's like a Buddhist aphorism, but it really that's where this whole idea came from, is to have these stringent
Yeah.
diets, um, which is odd because they are my way of maintaining control, but they're also an expression of like, okay, this is the one thing I'll control, and if I can't control everything else, that's okay. And if
Yeah.
just earlier I was making a stew. I make this stew every week. There's this called cholent. It's a Jewish stew. I make it every week, and it takes a full night to make. You put it in a pot, and then it cooks all night, and then in the morning you eat it. But because of my diet, I couldn't eat it this morning, and I tasted it accidentally as I was stirring it, and instead of freaking out, oh, I've eaten something, it's okay. It's okay. Just let it go. You made a mistake, move on. And I feel like that's the lesson. I've talked way too long
Yeah.
about this, but
No, well, but that's a great lesson for, and I think for everything, the letting go and realizing that some things you can control, so you can't overthink about this. It is Buddhism, but it has this has in a lot of philosophies. In for example, something that helps me with my anxiety and my issues is Stoicism, and it is
sure.
in the core center of it. It's realizing what is under your control and what is not on your control, and letting go of those things that not your control, because we spend so much time obsessing about these things, thinking about what will they think if I do this, if I make this thing, what would they say, if I don't accept this invitation, will I ever be invited to this again? And but really all we really have to control and think about is our thoughts and our actions, and how we can be better. So that's
Right.
how you think. The only thing you can control is when you can eat. So you can't control when someone will offer you food, when something will be available. So you put a limit on yourself, and that's a really great way to, at the thing you said, control how you let the control off. So it's a
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah.
So it makes
Right. And I
absolutely
think
sense, right?
to take from the Stoics, it is definitely moderation, which is that's a one of the lessons, as I understand it, of Stoicism, is to be more moderate in your pleasures, and I think it's a good lesson for people
Yeah,
like me,
yeah,
anyways. I know other people who have totally different challenges, and they handle some things that are a struggle for me. They handle them with no problem, and I'm
yeah.
amazed by that. But then they can't sleep at night or
Other
something.
issues,
There's always
yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone is facing their own battles. That's a phrasing we just learn later in life, and it takes a lot longer to internalize and
Yeah.
to be more be more forgiving, I would say. Uh, do you? Okay, I want to ask. I always ask everybody that comes here and they makes games or make creative stuff. And one thing I noticed when you introduced yourself, you didn't mention your podcast. So we can
That's
go back
true.
about this.
No, no,
So
that's yeah. I also co-host the podcast. That's true.
uh,
I did not think of it. I am the co-host of Between Two Cairns, which is actually has nothing to do with Cairn. It was just a very clever name that Brad came up with. It's a riff off
yeah,
of Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis, which is a hilarious show. So I had to
yeah, it's
agree.
great.
When he came up with that, I just realized, oh, all right, that's it. And it does speak truthfully about the show because Brad is very funny, and I have to kind of temper his humor. I don't consider myself a funny person, but he is so dang funny. He makes me laugh so much, and I have to really control it because it's too much sometimes. He really does irritate me.
Yeah.
Um, it's like people always ask, is your dialogue forced? It's not. It's 100% just natural how he annoys me, but he also is very funny, and so I've gotten more
Do,
used to it, a little more easy with it.
do you, or does he get any inspiration from Galifianakis at all? Do you try to do any
No,
of those
none of
outrageous
that. No,
things they
it's
do on the show?
just
No.
no, because Zach Galifianakis' whole thing is he gets the guests to play along. He got
Uncomfortable, yeah.
Barack Obama
Yeah.
to sit there and listen to his terrible comments and then make fat jokes back to him, and we don't do that. We just thought it's just a really
Okay.
fun. I mean, it is a
Yeah.
legitimately genius title, and it's not. It wouldn't
Yeah.
make sense if I wasn't a co-host, but it also isn't about Karen at all. It's just silly.
Yeah.
We're an RPG variety podcast, I guess you'd call it. We really do just review modules each week, but that's more of an excuse for us just to talk about things. The module
Yeah.
kind of focuses the show. I think for some folks it might be a little too unfocused, but we just try not to take things so seriously. And I did say, he's the funny one. I definitely try to make jokes, and then later in editing I remove them because they're never funny. Like, I'm never funny. That's my one lesson is, if you
Well,
think you're funny, you're wrong. That's been my
no,
experience.
come on.
For me,
You have no, but we are very self-critical, self-conscious about this. You can be fun. Sometimes we are fun, but we think we're not. And I don't know. Don't censor
sitting in
yourself too
it's not.
much. You know.
I think it. Here's the thing. I I think the humor in that show comes from the dialogue between us, so I'll keep that. But when I
Oh,
try to
okay.
make a joke, I'll try to like
Oh
make a
yeah,
joke.
yeah,
It's never good.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
I listen to it later and I just nope.
yeah.
So it's really about
The
knowing.
the best jokes I think are very natural. You know. So
Yes,
maybe
exactly,
that's this. You
exactly.
know. Yeah.
But he can actually make the jokes. Like I remember I asked a question once, and I had him and Sam Amelli on the show for our Gamer Blast from the past, where we look at classic modules, and both of them were just rapid fire, making ridiculously stupid jokes that are very funny. And I got so flustered, and then I listened to it later, and I realized how smart their jokes were. I can't think that quickly, you know. That's just not how I operate, and
Yeah.
it all
Yeah.
goes back to like I remember playing a card game with my sister, and she was 14 and I was 16, and she was so much faster than me at the card game, and I remember realizing I'm just not a fast guy. Like I'm just, and I think
Yeah.
it's the same with humor. You have to be really
Yeah.
quick. If you miss it by a
Yeah.
second, you know,
Yeah.
it's no longer a
Timing.
good joke. Yeah,
Timing is
timing.
everything. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
everything. You know. That's that joke. That know what's the real secret about comedy? It is timing, timing,
Yeah,
timing.
yeah.
It's
Or
the real.
you
You
wait a
know.
long
Yeah,
time. You wait
yeah,
like, yeah, it's just to wait
yeah.
like a long time. See, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, uh, what I was gonna ask you before I remembered you about the podcast is, could you try to define weird for you, and how do you seek it in games or in things in your life and experiences that you are interested with it and you're interested to work with it?
Yeah. Okay. So when I think of the word weird with a capital W, I think of things like weird fiction, you know, the unsettling, that sort of thing. I don't That's not necessarily what you're getting at, because I've listened to some of your other
It's a
interviews,
little
and
bit, yeah.
it's
Well,
yeah, no, I mean there is an aspect of that, but you're not asking me about
yeah.
Cthulhu, you know? It's there is to me
It's more a
the what
personal view, yeah.
right, right.
The things that are interesting to
Uh,
you, yeah.
what has attracted me, I think in general, to the role playing game scene and also to weird fiction at the same time is the sense of possibility, the sense of the unexpected. When I participate in a role playing game experience, I love being surprised. That's the number one most important experience on either side of the table. If I'm playing as a player or as a GM, I want to be surprised. I want to have thought of this great idea and then have other people take it and do something with it that I couldn't have imagined. And it's also true in life. You know, I want to feel like patterns
Yeah.
that I am obsessed with detecting are no longer the case, or I want to feel like I'm being tripped up by what is expected in life. And you know, there's this uh, Buddhist saying, or I think it could just be Chinese, but I think it's actually Buddhist. If you suddenly feel punctured, it's probably because your bubble has burst. And I often look for those kinds of experiences, that newness. You know, there's this whole idea where I will I don't like to rewatch the same thing over and over again. I mean, I do have a couple things that I will watch on television. Like my dad visits, will always watch Seinfeld, for example, and that's a nostalgia
Yeah,
factor.
yeah.
Um, but on the other hand, I really have a difficult time rewatching movies I've seen already, unless it's showing it to someone and I can experience their experience secondhand. I always want to look for the new over and over and over again, constantly looking. If I've already seen this thing, I've already read that thing. There's a million books that I've forgotten that I've already read that I could go and read again and be surprised, but I can't get myself to do it because I
Wow.
want to do the new thing. Now, the irony is I will still run the same like adventure over and over and over again. And Brad, you know, my co-host, he asked me recently on an episode, you know, you read all these modules, but you keep running the same ones. And the reason I do that is because I enjoy the experiences of play more than the text. Like I've run Winter's Daughter 50 times, but I really
It's a
like
great
watching how
invention.
different it is. But I like how different groups deal with it,
Yeah.
especially the original version, which had this kind of messed up opening where this woman is being sacrificed by these hooded figures, and then it turns out she wants to be sacrificed. It was such a brilliant conceit, and I understand why Gavin removed it, and I even respect that and don't run that version anymore. But I love that concept of here's something totally unexpected, and every group I would run it through would act
Uh,
differently. Some people would assist in the ritual, other people would try to kill these guys and end up either dead or successful, and other people would try to save her. And it was just so interesting to watch the different reactions. So even though it was the same setting, it was a different encounter and experience every time, a kind of refinement. So again, for me, the weird is to explore the unexpected, and I think that's probably a trite response, but it is how I feel about it. I just am always curious and searching for this new experience, and it causes problems. It causes issues like I don't plan at all, because the worst case scenario when I'm traveling or something is that I'll be surprised, you know? So when my wife and I will plan a trip, she will get out a spreadsheet and put in days. I don't think about it until the day before. I will maybe get a hotel for the first day. And it's become a problem since we have a child now. But prior to that, I just didn't make any effort to. I was fine literally just getting to the place and figuring it out as we get there, because
I
I
totally
find the
relate.
which part,
Totally
my wife or
relate.
my part, or on my
Your
end.
part, like
Yeah,
I have the
yeah,
same. I'm learning how to play now because that wouldn't leave, my wife really pissed off. Like,
yeah.
because for some people they think we don't care. We care. Want to spend that time with her, but wake up and say, "Oh, let's go to the park." It's more like, I don't know, free spirited, I guess, or it's my lack of attention. I don't know, but I'm learning to play more, and because that's something that is important to her. So that's
Right.
something I've
Yep.
learned to do because it's for someone that I cares about. But I totally see that, uh, when I go to Gen Con alone, and I spend a few days in another city, I don't play anything. I get my room, and I know I want to go to this and this and that place. You know, and if there's a show, I buy the tickets for the show I want to see. But other than that, I've just, well, I have some time now. What can I do? Oh, I can go to this store. I can go to this park and can do this kind of
Right.
stuff.
That
Yeah,
sense of possibility is as attractive as the event itself. You know, that feeling of
yeah.
anything is possible. And I
And
think
you
it's
can
just a.
discover stuff, right? You can
Yes,
discover. You can be
exactly.
walking by some place.
Totally.
And, well, what's that?
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And I think that used to be a lot more acceptable before the internet. Like, I feel like I used to walk into libraries and then just pick a book based on its cover and read that book. And now you can go to Amazon and there's a guy who's put a list that
Yeah.
says the top 50 science fiction novels you should read before you die. I never had that. I found, the Tombs of Atuan sitting in a library and looked at the cover and thought it was cool. I found weird books I should not have read, for my age at least, because they were just there and no one was stopping me. And I feel like that sense of possibility, it's different now. I mean, you can accidentally stumble on stuff on the internet. You can, go on Wikipedia, what's this, and you can totally quote follow the rabbit hole or fall down the rabbit hole. But I have
But that
felt.
has to be very intentional right now.
Yes, you have to think
Nowadays, I
about it.
think for discovery we have to be very intentional and go there to discover something. But I as you said, before the internet, discovery could be accidental, and right, I don't know, just walking
No, you're
around.
right. Before the internet, it was a sense of randomness, and maybe it was false. Just like how it was a small sense
Maybe,
of the
yeah.
world, maybe it was false. But it I think we have to some degree lost a certain mode of humanity that we will never see again. The idea. I used to use payphones, right? I didn't have a cell phone. I used payphones,
Yeah.
and I had this friend who we would call each other to hang out. We were in our, let's say, 17, 18, 19 range of age. And I remember we'd have to organize when we'd see each other. I would say, okay, I will pick you up tomorrow at 4, or come get me at the video rental store. I remember that. He was supposed to pick me up one day at this video rental store. And he forgot. And so I just waited there. and there was nothing I could do. I just
Yeah.
was I could walk a mile to the payphone and call him, or I could just hope he remembered, or
Yeah.
to bring it back to like Seinfeld. Pretty much every plot of that show could not exist today because you could solve it through just calling someone. Oh, where's so and so? They didn't show up. Stuff like that. And it's just cell
Yeah.
phones. And this is true for movies now. Is people are setting movies either in a time period where cell phones didn't exist, or they're creating situations so that the cell phones don't work. There's no cell service
Yeah.
because cell phones blow up every single uh, traditional story arc.
Issue.
I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
there are ways to do it, but it is a major problem. Like, well, why don't you just call someone? You have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
invent a reason. They lost their phone. The cell service doesn't
Yeah.
work. Whatever.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to create, problems like in investigative adventure, like horror games. It's no wonder why a lot of them are set in past ages, in the 80s, even in the 90s, because when you start getting too close, you can just search stuff. And then if we can do what we can do today, it gets a lot easier. So for you to make really challenging adventures for, in a modern setting, you have to be you have to think about this stuff, and you can't use the same excuses every time. Oh yeah, no reception here. Like you
Right.
can invent these
Right.
excuses, but like after the third adventure, it gets like, oh come on, what's going on? Like,
Right.
why don't you
Well,
just set this in the 80s or in the 90s if you can
well,
use this stuff, right?
alternatively, you can invent new time periods. Like there's this horror film, It Follows, and it's a great movie. It's a short movie. Really great music. Anyhow, in this film, it's basically set in modern times, except they don't have cell phones, but they do have e-readers. Like there's like weird technology, like it's sort of a 80s mixed with modern era, and they don't explain it. They don't explain it. It seems like modern, but there's no
It's
cell
just
phones.
this.
But there
Okay.
are e-readers, and I like that sort of thing where it's a what if things were slightly different, developed at a slightly different pace, or in a different order, because it gives opportunity to undo the expected. And that's actually one thing I really like about games like Electric Bastion Land is they give you a handhold into the world because hey, there's electricity. They give you this feeling of connection to the world, but it's a different world. It feels different, and therefore you can be surprised. And I think that's where weirdness comes from, is something you are familiar with that's somehow different and therefore unsettles you and displaces you from your sense of self and the world around you.
Yeah, it's a subversion of expectations. You expect something. That's how it works, and you go, not exactly. This
Right.
thing here, it's different, and you go,
Right.
wow, I get it now. Or no, I don't get it, but I want to know more. And I
Right.
think that's
Right.
that's the essence of weird. Like you break expectations, but you kind of lean in. You kind of want to know more about it. Do you have any kind of ritual, creative ritual for when you start writing or when you go do your podcast? Anything that you helps you get into the moods of the creative work?
Not the podcast. That's just constantly reading modules, and then I take notes on a little index card, and then I write them down on a Google Doc. Brad, by the way, takes no notes. He just does it live. I can't. I read it over a couple days, so I will forget where things are, and it's not how I work. Um, I've also seen his notes for when he writes adventures. They're complete. I don't. They're not. They're nonsense words. But my overall, I guess, strategy is to write down things in my brain so I don't have to hold them in there. I have a decent memory for some things and a terrible memory for other things. So getting stuff written down digitally is really important to me. It helps me let go of those facts, and then I don't have to fill my brain with them, and it gives me space for
Yeah.
more things, or at least that's how it works metaphorically. So with respect to writing adventures, for example, I just have been running this West Marches campaign over the last 6 months. And for those who don't know, West Marches is basically where each session lasts exactly one kind of job. Like the characters will leave a city and then they'll go into an unexplored territory, they'll have an adventure, and then you kind of end it at the end of that adventure and you kind of hand wave the return trip. And the unique thing about this is you have a rotating roster of characters. So you might have 20 or 30 characters that could play, but only 5 or 6 to play each time. And it really solves the whole scheduling thing. Like I just say, I'm playing on
Yeah.
Sunday morning at this time. Join if you want. And people do. And if they don't show up, that's fine. And it's worked out really well. But one thing I found, I decided to task myself with only using my own original content for each adventure. So we've had 10
Oh.
sessions and I've written 10 different adventures. And what I do is the Saturday before the adventure, well, what I do actually is I come up with some cool names for jobs, and then I give the jobs, I just give the characters the names of the jobs. So one might be the Eye of Dust, it'll be called. They don't know what that means, but they have some basic details of like what I think it should be about. Oh, it's an escort mission, I might say. And then they can choose
Yeah.
between the jobs based on how they sound. And then I go, and whichever one it sounds like they're choosing, that's the one that the day before
Yeah.
we play, I spend 2 hours or 3 hours writing it. And I write it like it's an adventure in a published module. So I don't just write a line of stuff. I write in a very specific keying format that then later, 6 months or a year later, when I look at it, it actually makes sense to me. Because what I found is when I was writing original adventures for earlier systems like the Black Hack or Into the Odd, I could come back to it a year later and I didn't understand what the hell I had written. I would say like, what? Why does this say grandma
Yeah.
who is also hunting a stepson? What? Like I could not figure
Yeah.
out. So I decided if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna write it like it's a freaking adventure. And the other benefit of
Yeah.
this model is that I'm gonna start releasing these adventures just for free. And what I want to do is just take them exactly as they are, clean them up a little bit to disconnect them from the campaign, and then just start releasing them in the same format over a period of time leading up to the Kickstarter for Cairns Second Edition. And I'm so glad that I took the time to write them in this format. So if I could make any suggestion for people who do plan on eventually publishing stuff that they're running in their home games, write it in the format that you want it to look like. You can still edit it later, but at least it'll be intelligible. At least it'll be something you can understand down the line. And that's my biggest
Yeah.
discovery I've made.
Yeah. I would say for you to try to take notes in a way that you can understand. I don't know if you write that fast, but I mean, if I'm trying the adventure and I'm writing as it for publication, it's gonna take a while for me. I do take notes, but I try to make a minimal version of those kids, like in USC that you have those main like bolded words in the
Yes,
initial of each
yes,
paragraph.
yes,
That's
yes.
kind of my notes. I don't go for like the detailed stuff afterwards, but as I'm writing, I try to. I first of all I make a map to make the connections of the rooms and stuff and other regions, and and I make notes with bullet points, but not as ready for publication, I would say. But it gets there. You have to figure out. It's very hard to balance. You have to figure out something that is fast that you can use to just play test, because probably you're gonna make some changes for it to be ready for publication, right? For it's like the
Right.
first time you're playing this, uh, you have to find the balance between what you can understand and will remember later, and what you can do fast so you can play it
Right.
and play it again and keep
Right.
trying, right?
Right. What I do is during play, I'll make a note, and then I immediately after play commit that to the normal structure. Because if like three
Oh,
days
right.
go by and I look at the index card,
Yeah,
I don't know what the hell this is. I
it's
don't.
gone.
It's
Yeah,
it'll say just like I have no idea what.
yeah,
It'll just be a
yeah.
phrase, and it made
It's
sense on that
yeah,
day.
at that time, because that happened and you heard that phrase, and ice cream grandma makes totally sense because that's what
Yeah,
happened there. They said something, but after a while it's gone.
it
Some things,
disappears.
if you
Yeah.
don't make a notes right away, it's just gone. Like having ideas, right? Like creative people, I don't know how do you do this, but I use the OneNote app on my phone because I might
Mm-hmm.
be anywhere, and this
Mm-hmm.
idea just
Mm-hmm.
strikes me. Yesterday I was going to buy some chocolates to give to my kid's teacher, and we were on the street just walking, and he obviously was talking about Minecraft and was talking about the command block on Minecraft, and I had this idea. Well, what if I take the command block for Minecraft and turn into artifacts on Primal Quest made by Ancient One. So that's this translucent cube with a rune on each side, and it depends on the combination of the runes you press. You actually change reality, like the command block on Minecraft. So, but you have
Wow.
to go
Wow.
to ruins and read this ancient language. Like you go to Atlantis and you see like the code to make the sea rise or something,
Right.
and
Right.
you know. But I had to, oh,
Right.
sorry, son. He was talking. And I said, oh, I'm so
I gotta
sorry,
write this
son.
down.
Wait, just a few seconds. I have to because we're trying. I make my best not to use my phone. If I'm my kid, I want to be present. I want to be with him. But I'm sorry. I have to get my phone to write this down, or I will forget it. I didn't even write it down because it takes more time. I have this WhatsApp group with myself that I call "Message from the Past," and I record
That's
it
very
and I send to
clever.
myself. Yeah,
That's very clever. I have a similar thing. I use Google Keep and I will just write into Google Keep, but that is very smart to make a WhatsApp group with yourself. Wow, that's
yeah.
clever. And
and
I have
and
that
and the name is messages from the past,
from
from the
past. Yeah,
past self from me
right.
talking to myself. Yeah, it's great.
That's very clever. I have at work, we use Slack, and I have a channel with myself that I just put stuff into, and none
Yeah.
of it is work related. It'll be like a screenshot of like some text that I found somewhere that I liked, and it makes no sense out of context, but it's not even work related. That's clever, and that's also you know I don't know. Your son is what, 8. How old is he?
8, yeah, 8.
Yeah. Um, my son has just started. He's 6.5. He's just started with Minecraft, and he's not interested of building anything. He just wants to fight monsters. So
W-
it's not
my,
really working for him
my
as
son's
well.
completely the opposite. He hates competition. He doesn't
Huh.
really has a difficult with losing. We're working with these RPGs are great to work with
Oh
losing because
yeah,
sometimes you just can't win.
yeah.
So it's perfect. But for video games, it's hard for him. And creative
I'm
mode is
jealous.
his thing.
I wish he liked creative. He is very good at losing. We've been playing board games his entire life. I mean, he was legitimately beating me at Sorry at 4 years old.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
but and he got that, and he's got really good at losing. We just this morning we played Castle Panic, the like adult version, which is basically a tower defense cooperative game,
Yeah.
and we lost, and he was totally fine with it. But I ran Mouse Ritter for him a couple weeks ago, and he he has to move his body. He can't sit and do things.
Oh
So
yeah.
when we
6 years old. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. So when we're playing Mouse Ritter, he has to act out what's happening,
Yeah.
and he has to say like, and then I jumped on top of the rat and I slit its throat, and but he can't do anything that doesn't involve violence. There has to be some kind of
Yeah.
killing. And I wish he would do, hey, let's build. He doesn't care for Legos. He doesn't
Yeah.
care about Minecraft creative mode. And it's interesting. I didn't make him this way. He just
Yeah.
doesn't like it. He likes to be adventurous. So I have to really focus. We play a lot of adventure games that involve skill and fighting. He's really good at like Zelda, but
Yeah.
anyway, so I don't know. I'm jealous, but I also am happy that he at
Yeah.
least is into this
At
stuff.
the same time, I'm kind of jealous in the same way. Like my kid don't want play anything that's kind of challenging, because if he loses, he's like, oh, I don't want to play anymore. This game
Wow,
sucks.
okay. Yeah, mine
And
only
we're
wants
like,
to win harder. He does not like when he loses,
yeah,
it's fine. Now we have to try again so he can win,
yeah,
and yeah, I was afraid he'd be more I'm not competitive at all. In fact, I'm bad at some games because I'm not like two-player games. I just don't care about winning. I just don't care. So my
yeah.
family, we play a lot of
For
this game called Tack, which is like kind of like chess. And I just halfway through, I just get I don't care, and I stop looking for the solutions to win. And so I think you need a little bit of competitiveness. I could use like
yeah,
a little bit more.
everything's a balance, right? I see myself and my son a lot, so I know I had problems with this as a kid too. And it's hard to cheat him. We're always trying to. He's very unforgiving about mistakes, even from himself. He it's hard, but it's something that he's learning. He's getting better, and I think RPGs really help with that. I remember like the first time, the same thing. Like he may be 6 years old, but he found like these huge hairy monsters. with teeth, and he was really angry, and he was trying to battle the monster, and the monster was defending itself, but then he realized he saw the monster had like a shard on its feet, but
Uh,
so he helped the monster, and the monster became alright, and they became friends and
your
stuff like
friends,
this. So
yeah.
yeah,
My
yeah.
son would see this shard in its feet and then say, "I better stab that thing in more." He
Uh,
doesn't.
let's
The other
step the
day,
other foot.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah, we played yesterday. We played Spaceship, which is where he sets up all the chairs in the room to be like a spaceship, and I have to be the captain, and he's controls the lasers in the back, and
yeah.
so it's kind of like a Millennium Falcon situation, but. I he he tried to deploy this tunnel. He has one of these like caterpillar tunnels that kids climb through. It looks like a
Oh
little
yeah.
tunnel, and he used that to deploy it to the other ship. And I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I'm going to go and knock out their oxygen so they all die." and, and I said, "Maybe we could just knock their engines out. Maybe we don't have to kill them." And he said,
Yeah.
"But they're bad guys." And I said, "Yeah, but maybe only the leader is a bad guy."
Uh,
I tried to work him through, but he's very scarily black and white
yeah.
about this stuff. It's
Yeah, well, it's kids, it's you know kids still see like the police as something heroes
right, right.
always,
Yeah, mine
and
doesn't talk about the police at all, which is kind of a relief. He has no kind of frame of reference for them. I've talked to
yeah,
him a few times. I remember my kid's school wanted to have like a police car there and have police talk to the kids, and I was very opposed to it. I told the teacher I don't want to normalize police relations. I feel like they should be seen as a source of problems, not solutions. Yada yada. And the teacher thought I was like an asshole
yeah,
for that, and the thing is, it's not like I live in a very liberal town. It's not like the police are beloved here, and it's not like they are kind of bad, but I remember being like, I don't want my kid to just see the cops as the solution. And
yeah,
when we got a present once, someone gave him a present of a cop car, and I never gave it to him. I just hid it. I put it.
yeah,
I put it somewhere. I just don't need it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's here. It's super weird. We have organized crime is big. How 70% of my city is controlled by militias,
Hmm.
and you see the police just though it's a war. They use tanks. They use like these
Right.
reinforced cars. They
Right.
always use rifles. It's literally a war scene, and people give kids, a police car that's a war tank, and then it
Wow.
has this image of
Wow.
kill or be killed. It's really weird, and it happens the same thing. He got this huge tank car of the police. We just hit it because
You
I
hit
don't
it.
want
Yeah.
this. Come on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. He doesn't. I feel like kids. You try so hard to figure out when to introduce them to certain subjects, and I don't think
yeah,
there's really a right answer. He's been asking me a lot about Israel randomly because I'll be listening to the news,
yeah,
or I'll talk to my
it's yeah,
father or
it's
something,
out there.
and, and I try to be very honest with him about what's possible and what how maybe sometimes people do things that are wrong, even if like your own country might be doing the wrong thing sometimes, and what that means. And his response is always like way out there, like
Yeah.
he'll say like, "So do people come and try to kill children? Like, do people kill children?" And I'll say, "Yeah,
Oh
it
yeah,
happens." And,
that's
and I said, "Sometimes it's the good guys doing it. Sometimes it's the bad guys. Sometimes there's no good guys or bad guys, and the world is not
yeah,
that simple." And he just is kind of silent for a while. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, it's kids surprise you. And I remember one time this was many years ago, like I think he was 3 or 3.5. We were watching this show about sharks, and he said, "Are sharks dangerous?" And I said, "Well, sharks only really kill a few people in the whole world every year. They're not that deadly. They can kill, but human shark interactions are actually pretty low in terms of like deer kill more
yeah,
people because they jump in
yeah.
front of cars." And I said,
Hippopotamus kill more people than
"Yeah, well,
sharks.
those things will destroy you."
Yeah.
Uh, and I said, "Actually, we kill way more sharks." And then I remember he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "Are we the monsters?" And I was just
Wow.
shocked,
Yeah.
shocked by that. I didn't say yes. but it
Well,
was
yeah, that's the
shocking.
yes, we are,
Yeah.
son. Yes, we are.
Yes, it's oh man. Anyways,
Yeah,
wow, that was quite a
but
topic there.
yeah.
Go.
Now I'm thinking we need to use more hippopotamus on our adventures as monsters,
Yeah,
because these
forget
things are
bears.
out there.
Yeah,
Yeah, these things are out there.
they break
Cleaning the slates.
watermelons in one bite. You can
Yeah,
literally throw a watermelon in their mouth and they'll eat the whole thing. It's incredible.
yeah, yeah. Uh, do you have any idea? I mean, you probably everybody says that. Oh, my ideas come from everywhere, and I know that. But do you have any particular field or author or genre or media or anything that you feel you're constantly drawing from
Yeah,
when you make your work, your art?
yeah,
It can be not even a media; it can be like for an environment. Since Cairn is like this fantasy game that's about outdoors and being out there.
yeah.
Do you have anything that you always draw? You see yourself drawing from time
Yeah,
to
I
time?
mean, many things, many specific things. The first one is folk tales. I read a lot of folk tales from all over the world. For a couple of years, I was reading basically only Jewish folk tales. I would take breaks and read Italian folk tales. And by the way, if you have any good Brazilian folktale collections, I would love to see them. I know
Oh,
there's some pretty interesting monsters down there.
yeah, I don't
Um,
know. I'm gonna have to search about if they have in English, but I do. I have a bunch of folklore books right here because I'm using them for Primal Quest. I want to mix
of course,
prehistory dinosaurs with original people. So I'm going through
right, right.
mythology of original people from Brazil. So I have legends and books about Cam- uh, Câmara Cascudo. It's a researcher of Brazilian folklore and culture, and he has many books. There's probably something in English because it's a scholar, so maybe there's some academic books about
Uh,
him. So
Send
I will,
away. I'm
yeah,
very
I'll look
interested.
for it, and I will put on the show
Yeah,
notes too if I find it because some people might
there
be interested too. Yeah.
there was a guy. There was someone recently, maybe last year, who put out a small collection of Brazilian monsters to use in RPGs. It was on itch at least, and I
Uh-huh.
remember getting it and thinking it was very cool. So
The
folk tales are
Mary
definitely a hmm? Go
the
ahead.
Mary Mushman, the people
Yes,
from
yes.
Knock
Mhm.
magazine, they put
Yep.
out a folklore bestiary,
Right.
and
Oh, I have that. Yeah.
I actually made four monster for there based on Brazilian folklore.
I remember one of them is like, yeah, one of them was it a guy who was headless or something to do with heads? There was one that
No, there's that guy that's like so evil that he can die, and that's one that I'm really proud of because I inserted collaborative storytelling in our OSR game because he's so evil he can die. So every time he takes an action, everybody on the table has to say the worst thing that this guy can do, and that's what he does. So uh, the the GM can't be the most evil. Like the evil has to come from everybody because he's the worst one there, right? So that's something that everybody
I,
has to decide the
is
worst thing he can do.
so I definitely read it, but the problem with folktales, this is a problem that happens all the time, is that they're all mixed together in my head now. I
Oh
have
yeah,
like the ones from
yeah,
the
yeah,
Basque region and then and
yeah.
Brazil and everyone just mixed together. And this happens when I'm doing my own research. Like I am currently running a Kickstarter for Beyond the Pale. It's probably going to be over by the time this is out, but Beyond the Pale is a Jewish inspired Kickstarter, or I should say, adventure being kickstarted, and I spent multiple years doing research for this adventure, basically reading stuff, pulling out what I thought was gameable, and then including it in a setting slash adventure. And my problem is, I now have a book on my shelf that's literally the entire book is an index of folktales, of Jewish folktales specifically. So you can look, when did I find a Dybbuk? Okay, here are 8 stories about Dybbuks. And then you have to go and find the books. The book does not include the stories. It just includes the names of books that contain stories that have this character. And I had to buy this book, which
Wow,
was really expensive because I
yeah,
couldn't remember where things were from. I just couldn't remember. Like it's such
yeah.
a mishmash of stories, and that's happened with most photos. But I still think it's really worthwhile to read folk histories and folk tales
Yeah.
because they speak to something very primal and very universal. I
Yes.
really like
That's
them.
what
So
I'm
that's
gonna say. That's you said it all mixed up together, but they are like a collective imagination, and they kind of mix up together in some aspects already. So I think that's fascinating too, to have them mix on your head and then maybe come up with something for a game that's kind of a mixture of different folk tales, right?
and I think if you're respectful of the source material and
Yeah.
understand what where it if it's not your own. And I mean, whatever, it's everyone's, but there are times where I think, for example, if I were to look at African folk tales, I would be very careful, especially if they were folk tales that came out of the slave tradition, out of the what do you call it, the not spoken word, oral
Sure.
tradition that slaves used as a means for dignity and community. There are some amazing Black American and slave derived folk tales that are terrifying and beautiful, and I would never use them. It's not. I don't have a connection to that community enough to be able to use them. On the other hand, they're still inspiring, and there are still concepts. I recently read a Chinese folk tale that I loved so much that I actually told it I told it to children, like I tell stories to kids sometimes in my community. I used this Chinese folktale because it was so terrifying, and nothing about it necessarily spoke to a Chinese cultural aspect. It was just scary, and I told it on Halloween. And then I later used the same folktale in an adventure I was writing because it was basically about a tree that ate people, but it like only ate bad people, and it was about this hero who tricked this demon woman into getting eaten by the tree. It's a very cool story.
Wow. Yeah.
By the way, that one is from this folktale collection that was written in the 1700s by a Chinese aristocrat. It's called the Shadow Book of Ji Yun, and it's basically this. There was this guy who was this scholar of the strange, and he collected stories from his own life and from people he met about really, I guess they're not mythological because he treats them as if they're all true. And there's a story
Okay.
about, like, there's these turtles that have these humans that live inside of them, and if you find a turtle with
Wow.
one of these humans and you cut it out of the human, you can then cut your own body and put the human inside of you, and then it will give you long life and give you the ability to find minerals underground. Like, it was just crazy stories like that, and it's full
Wow.
of
Yeah.
those. It's so good. Shadow Book of Ji Yun, strongly recommend that one.
Yeah.
um
If you can send the name afterwards, so I can
I
try
will.
to find it and put it on the show notes for people, to look for it and maybe learn new things and sue for their own games. And and yeah, it's hard, when you're using the culture of other people. As you said, even enslaved people have, when people go through difficulties, they create stories. They create, we have to create stories to make sense of life. That's how humans behave. We always have to. Uh, that's how we transmit knowledge and transmit wisdom. And
Well, it's
I
also
think every time you use
it's a,
things for other people, if you can, call attention to that people. If you're using this, makes a small note there in the cover. Say, oh, aspects from this culture influence us. Look for these people, go for the source. These are interpretations, but they, you know, deserve all the respect. We already seen, like, we are seeing books now that are printed and say that they were produced in the lands of the original people, and trying to be intentional and be respectful, and saying your intentions clearly, and asking people to, if they're really interested in this, they really should look in the source and learn from these people. And that's what you said. If you can do it respectfully, I don't know. I think it's all right, because it's the human experience, right? And we are learning from each other.
right, right. And as you said, stories are how we transmit knowledge, but they're also how we create meaning and order in the world. They give us a sense
Yeah,
of
yeah,
of of empathy with other human beings and understanding. And I've always liked I don't, I think maybe it was Roger Ebert. Somebody said movies are empathy machines. They teach you to feel for other
Yeah.
people, and I think that's really true. But I think it's in general, stories are empathy
Yeah, it's
machines, and
stories. Yeah.
help you understand where people are coming from. In that folklore bestiary, you did the one about the crocodile, the crocodile
Yeah.
uh
Kuka.
witch Kukuka. Yeah,
Yeah.
is she a witch? I
Kuka.
don't Is she but even she, you gave
Kinda,
her
yeah.
a reason for being how she was in the
Yeah.
story. Like, she's pretty awful, like if you were a person to encounter her, but she had,
Yeah.
she had like someone cut her hair or something, and it was one of
Yeah,
the, like,
I like to yeah. One thing that the philosophy you said, like everything's going through something, and something that I say to my kid all the time, like everybody's doing their best. Like nobody, you know, wakes up and say, "Oh, today I'm gonna screw over with my kid's name is Pablo. Today I'm going to screw over with Pablo's day." Nobody wakes up, thinking like that. We're all going through.
right,
Maybe that person that was rude to you, but they're having problems at home. They're problems with their kids, with their wife, or their work.
right.
They have too much on their. So that's what I try to do that with kind of villains too. Like they're doing this because for them that's the best they can do. Like this is the best they can do because it's something's fucked up somehow. And I
It's also more interesting. It's just more interesting to have a reason for
yeah,
actions, and I think we
of course,
get,
yeah.
like, in the old school scene where there's a certain portion of the population that tries to venerate this idea of, just, isn't it fun to just go kill monsters in the dungeon? And it is fun, but it's more fun when it's more interesting and there's some meaning behind that. I feel like
Yeah,
you don't need to
and that's the
overthink
thing you
it.
said too. Your son said too. The monsters are us. These
Right.
monsters were
Right.
like, are us too. So that's
Yeah, we're the bad guys. Um,
yeah.
it's
It's a
Yeah,
reflection. Like everything is us. Like everything is a reflection of us. So
yeah,
if you can understand this monster somehow, we can some empathy, as you said. Like it is a story. So I think we can identify more and get more into it if we can understand their motives, right?
yeah. And is Stoicism, if I recall, has a strong reflexive. Like, you're supposed to reflect on your day, right? You're supposed to do that as part
Yeah.
of your practice or
Yeah,
whatever.
journaling. Yeah.
By the way, everything I know about Stoicism is because there was this woman. Gosh, I've forgotten her name. She's German. She was in the RPG scene for a while, and then she's out now. But I used to follow her on Mastodon years ago, and she became like a stoic online, and she started talking about it every day. And she's the reason. I'm trying to remember what her name is. She was really big in the Dungeon World community, and then she just
Okay.
kind of like left RPGs completely. Gosh, I feel bad. But the only reason I even know what it is because of role playing games. That's my point. Um,
Yeah.
Gosh, what was her name? Doesn't matter. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah.
uh, okay. Is there any kind of any creator? It can be either from the RPG sphere or for comedy or art or painting or literature. Someone that inspires you in a way that you learn from them. You try to simulate their work. You draw from them to do the things that you do. Like for example of this podcast by itself is inspired by the work of Pete Holmes do on their podcast, and some of the games. Like even though the stuff that Chris McDonald did with Into the Odd, we draw it from some of our games. But I was really wondering if there's someone that you always you follow and you understand their work and try to study them to see what you can learn for yourself.
Well, yeah, that's a great one. I can tell you, for the podcast, what made me want it to be in the format that it's in is, my favorite podcast is a film podcast called The Filmcast. It's an American podcast. It's about 12 years old. No, maybe more. It's an old podcast. I've been listening to it for at least a decade, and
Is still going?
it's yeah, it's still going. It's actually their full-time
Cool.
jobs, the guys who are in it. It's a very
Nice.
successful. They are probably the most successful film podcast. But I really like movies, and I really like relationship that the hosts have with one another. I feel like I know them even though I don't. Um,
Yeah.
and I really like the way that it was set up. So I kind of copied that when I set up the Between Two Cairns podcast. And because I do the editing, it's very if you listen to the filmcast, you'll hear, oh, that's where Yochai gets that from. They're much better at it, but I really do
Yeah.
take from that. In terms of design, definitely Chris McDowell. I copy his I like the idea that you give yourself this sort of scaffolding. Like, he is very much into 3 bullets at a time. You may create 3 bullets on a page and then you write within those confines. He didn't explicitly say that's what he does, but it's what he does. And it's the same if you look at his Mythic Bastionland playtest. He uses a very specific structure for how he describes examples of play, and then the kind of advice adjacent to it. And I really am impressed with that kind of thing. So I can't deny that I really respect his writing style and his kind of ethic. That said, he's not very vocal about those things, so it's not like
But it's
Chris McDowell said. It's more just, look what he
no, it's
did.
how we study their work.
And
How do
so he would definitely be up there. In terms of people outside the RPG sphere, I really respect this author named Michael Swanwick. He is a unfortunately not very well known science fiction and fantasy author who, until very recently, had the most nominations for a Nebula Award of any person in history, who has never won a Nebula Award. He would get nominated every year and he would never win. But he's a Philadelphia based author, and he has a blog, but he also writes a lot about how he writes, and he talks about how it's really difficult to write minimally. It's really, novels are easy. Novels, you can mess up 20% of the novel and it's still a good novel. You cannot mess up 20% of a short story, or 20% of a poem. It has to be even more perfect in a poem. And I think Faulkner talked about that too. Poems are the hardest to write. And Michael Swanwick he does write some novels. He's most well known for The Iron Dragon's Daughter, which is a anti-capitalist fairy tale. It's basically like, what if the Industrial Revolution came to the land of fairy, and like everything that would imply. Each of his books is about one subject, either capitalism, sex, war. I really love him, but he writes short stories as well, a few of which have actually been picked up and made into animated episodes of that Netflix show Love, Sex, and Robots.
Wow.
A couple of his stuff has actually been turned into that, but nobody knows who he is. But Michael Swanwick writes these short stories, and he writes about writing short stories. And I really respect his approach to minimalism. It even translates into like rule designs. Like when I'm coming up with a mechanic, I try to think of what other mechanics that mechanic will trigger. So for instance, does HP trigger loss of an ability score, for instance? Like when you lose HP, it then triggers another mechanic, and you have to think about that mechanic. So I try to think what mechanic is triggered by this mechanic, and then also I try to keep the amount of the amount of individual concepts that I have to keep in my brain. I want to keep those no more than 2 at once. So when I'm looking at a new mechanic like wilderness exploration, I don't want to have to think about more than 2 things at the same time related to that mechanic. And that idea I got from reading about how short stories are crafted, and about how and also copying from like Chris McDowell and Ben Milton and such. Is you look at minimizing the amount of brain space a person has to maintain in order to make the mechanic function the way you want. So this is very in the weeds. Honestly, not that interesting, but that's the answer to your question. Is I try to copy from Chris McDowell and
That's
Michael
great.
Swanwick.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are others. There are others for sure, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, that's your reference, and I think that's great. And a phrase that I love so much is like, from one thing learn 1,000 things. So yes, you can learn about game design and studying writing, short fiction, from I forgot the name, Michael Swanick, as you said.
Michael
You can learn
Swanwick.
from that.
Yep.
Yeah, I was watching a course about comedy, and I was the second time I was watching, I was like, yeah, I can use that for game design, and then that's
Cool.
something.
Can
And
you
now I
give me an
remember that
example?
just
What's the example? I want to hear it.
everybody asks me, why do I write in English and not in Portuguese? And some people here in Brazil don't like me at all because I do that. And there is one thing that Steve Martin said about comedy. That's like, you have to go where the action is. Like, you want to be a stand-up comedian, you have to go to New York, you have to go to LA. And I wanted to make games, and like the people I was seeing this in the games that I admired, I wanted to hang out with DCC people, with Black Hack, White Hack, and Paulo Greco that was making stuff on Google Plus. And so yeah, I have to write in English. That's
Right.
that's the people I am looking up to, the people I admire, the people I would like to hang
Right.
out with, and
You also
that's
have
what
this
I did.
skill. You were fluent in English, and that's a major skill,
Wow,
and
I've
you're
I've
using it.
been learning a lot. When I began, you know, I was super nervous about, because I saw people on Google Plus bashing others because of their poor English, uh, and I
That's
hire
annoying.
people to make me look
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
I
but you can
I've
host a
been
podcast in
learning.
English. That's really good. And no, I mean it.
Yeah,
It's English is hard. It doesn't make any
it's
sense.
much easier than Portuguese. It's
It's
much
you know
easier than
you know
Portuguese.
it's interesting. So do you know Rafi, that Brazilian comedian? There's a Brazilian
Yeah,
comedian, and he does stuff in English too.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
I watch
yeah.
him on
When I was in
YouTube.
New
He's
York,
very,
he was
yeah.
he was
He was
touring
there.
there. I didn't.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I watched some of his sets from when he was in New York. And he's very funny. He has that whole like pronouns joke about how his friend says, he says, "Oh, I'm going to make dinner tonight." And his friend says, "Okay, well, so and so is going to come and eat dinner with us," and referred to them as they. And so he thought it was a lot of people. So he made a lot of food. And then when only one when the person turned out to be one person, they were non-binary. Rafi said, "Well, you better eat all this fucking food because I made a lot of it." And it's great because he pokes fun of himself and also the language,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
understand Hebrew has no way of dealing with all the changes that English has been able to accommodate. And there are people have come up with ideas, but it's in
yeah.
Hebrew,
It's a
every
process.
word,
Yeah,
it's like subject, object, verb, everything has a gender. So when you
yeah.
talk to
Brazil
someone
too.
who,
Yeah,
it's well, right, but
Portuguese.
wait, but not,
Yeah.
but the in Portuguese, the verbs are not
Oh
gendered,
no,
right?
verb
Like,
no. Yeah,
right. In
no.
Hebrew they are. In Hebrew they
Wow.
are. And so if I'm saying
Yeah,
he is walking down the street, he, walking, and street are all verbed. And so you can misgender someone 3 times, 10 times in one conversation. And it's hard. It must be
yeah,
very hard for people who are going by different pronouns. But I really appreciated that joke from that guy. So I think it gives you an asset to be able to look at things from multiple perspectives because of your linguistic
yeah.
background. Also, I have a question for you. I have a
Sure.
lot of Brazilian friends online who play RPGs, and I still do not have an official Portuguese version of Cairn in like the laid out version. I have the SRD in Portuguese, but whenever I've talked to like my friend Mateo or any other people who I know who speak English and Portuguese, they all say, "Well, the people I know, we all just play stuff in English." But it is my white whale. Like, I want for people in Brazil to be able to get a copy of Cairn at
We can
cost.
make that
The
happen.
I have,
We can
dude.
make that happen. Yeah.
I've talked to 2 different places down there. I've said I do not need money from it. Just make it printable. I just want a printed version. I'll give you the affinity files. Just do the thing. And now the problem is there's going to be a second edition, so it's going to be the whole process over again. But I have
Well, but
Italian,
yeah,
Japanese,
yeah,
Polish, French,
yeah.
Spanish. I have it in Gaelic. I have a version of There's a version a
Wow.
guy made of Cairn in Gaelic that you can buy off like Lulu and Amazon. It's in Gaelic, but not Portuguese, when there are so many incredible Brazilian creators. And I can't even
Yeah.
sell there because it's so expensive to ship. People won't do it. I tried.
Yeah.
It costs
The
like
problem
$16 to ship.
Yeah, the problem here is a good place to do print on demand. We don't have a cheap, print on demand site
Right,
or
right,
printer. So
right.
that's
Well, even
that's
if
what
you could
it's
print
hard
it
for
at
us to have
home or
available.
something.
Yeah. What we could probably do is have a PDF that we can put somewhere and can
Right.
print at home,
That's what I
because there
want.
are people. Yeah, there's like informal print on demand people that you can the artisans that print the book and make a book for you. And I've used that for like some of our out of print books. I remember a GM Scream 2 for Halo Earth Expedition. I asked, uh, Jeff Combos, the author of the game, if I could
Hmm.
print a GM Scream because I wanted one, but
Right,
there isn't one being sold. So
right,
that's one of the.
yeah,
But we don't have like a store. But we can
right.
make that happen. Let's talk about afterwards.
Okay.
We
I've
can talk
waited
and then
literally
yeah,
years. So it's my
yeah.
Brazilian Portuguese is my white whale of I have it's already been
It's
translated.
a
All the
mess
text
here.
is
That's
translated.
here.
Well, it's just there's so many great Brazilians, artists,
Yeah.
creators. There really are. I would say an extremely high number. Like for instance, I know a couple Argentinians creators. I don't know any Peruvian or
Yeah.
I'm just saying Brazil is pretty unique for that region of the world for how many creators are coming out of there that are prominent in the scene, including you. Did you
Yeah.
know that your um, website and your like list of what Lulu books to buy from like 2016 or something?
Oh yeah.
I found that a long time ago, and it was a huge influence. I used it to buy a bunch of stuff. Like I'm just saying, it's helpful, and it's
Yeah.
from a guy in Brazil. So yeah, I just want to give back.
Yeah. Sure, yeah, of course. I understand. Yeah, I should publish more stuff here. It's just that I'm lazy.
Mhm.
Because what I do in the United States, I make the book and I send it to someone, and someone prints it and ship it. And here, Brazil, it's usually you that have to do this stuff. So I'm like, I don't want to do this.
Right,
I don't have space to have boxes of books here to ship people
right,
because, as you said,
right,
print to demand doesn't work here. So I'd have to,
right. Yeah,
ship stuff. And there's a lot
totally.
of friends of ours that do stuff in the United States that they publish their stuff here and they distribute their games. I don't want to do that. I'm sorry.
Right,
I
right.
can't.
Of course. Well, it's a shame because you have a lot of stuff to distribute. You've done a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
But my own stuff like day job, the kids, wife, and then the house, and 4 cats. And
yeah.
if I put boxes here, the cats would be like scratching out the boxes. And
It's too many cats.
yeah,
And you had six before. That's just too many. I
yeah,
have a dog
yeah.
and a cat, and I don't want any more creatures in my house. That's enough.
Well,
They're
dogs
already
are a lot of work. Yeah,
well,
right.
yes, yes, more than the cat, but the cat actually goes with us on hikes. So it's
Wow.
like it's like I yesterday we took the dog through the woods, and the cat followed us, and he's slower than the dog, and so he's always out of breath trying to catch up, and he doesn't have to. And when I try to pick him up and carry him, he won't let me. So
He
it's just
won't
his
let.
own.
Yeah,
He chooses it. He wants to come with us.
yeah,
It's extremely cute. I will.
yeah. Hello, weirdos. This is Diogo Nogueira, and I'm back with a word from our sponsors. Me. I just released a new game called Cosmosaurus, in which you play a dinosaur space ranger who protects the galaxy from evil threats such as slime bankers, undead pirates, and Cosmosaurus from a void dimension. It's a game with a runes-light system inspired by Forged in the Dark and Lasers and Feelings. It comes with a bunch of tables for you to generate content for it. If you know my games, they're really easy to play and they have tools to help you improvise and play with low prep. It's an ideal game for one-shots, short campaigns, and introducing new people to the hobby, and it's a really perfect family game. I play with my kids all the time. It's a game inspired by Saturday morning cartoons. It's really well illustrated by Lucas Kowalski from Poland, and with a great layout by Guilherme Gontijo. It's a really fun game. You should check it out on TTRPG, itch.io, or exclusively in print on exaltedfuneral.com. I have many other games there, check them out. All the links are in the show notes, so click there. And let's get back to Weird with our chat. I love cats. I have like photos. My cat, I think he believes to be a pirate parrot, because he's always on my shoulder. and then I don't know.
He's a parrot.
Yeah. Yochai, you're working to publish current second edition. You have the player's guide pretty much ready. You
Hmm.
gave some out on you Dragon's Meats, right?
No,
And
at
yeah.
PAX Unplugged. I wish I had gone to
Oh yeah,
Dragon Meet,
PAX
but yeah, PAX
Unplugged.
Unplugged.
Yeah. PAX Unplugged, and you're working to have more stuff for it because of the Kickstarter. There was more than the player's guide, right?
It's
Uh,
a box set.
what?
It'll have, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
it's gonna be big. And one thing that I was gonna ask you, it's your favorite weird part about current second edition that you were proud to have worked on, and you're excited to see what people will do with it when they get the game.
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably the backgrounds. Like the biggest difference between the two games, the rules are identical. There are no changes. There are clarifications. I had to rewrite certain sections about 50 times before people stopped asking questions about it. Looking at you, Scars. But the biggest change is I added backgrounds. So originally you would roll a background like an herbalist, and then you just kind of made up what that meant. What
Yeah.
I've done with second edition is you now can get something similar to an herbalist. You have a green wise or a forager or whatever, and what I have done is I've tied the backgrounds to these tables, much like Electric Bastion Land had backgrounds tied to tables, and you would roll on those tables as you create your character. So instead of rolling a random amount of gear, like, oh, I have this armor and this sword, you roll really specific gear tied to your character. So for instance, um, here's the half witch. Starts with a spell book called Thicket. Thicket is when you make a bunch of trees show up. Iron dagger, an herbs pouch to restore one's strength, and a ghillie suit, which is like a way of remaining hidden. So you start with those items, which are really specific to your background. Then you roll on these two tables. One of the tables is what did you bring back from the Unseelie Court? And that's kind of like a fairy court. And you might get a black rose fiddle, which causes intense sadness and immobility in any nearby mortals. You don't know how to play it. That's one example.
Yeah.
Then there's five more examples, five more results, and then there's another table. What concoction do you carry, and what rare ingredients did you gather to make it? And you might get a night dust powder, the ritual burning of 6 owls. When tossed in the air, day turns to night for a short while. Two uses. So what these do is give the players a sense of connection to the world. That was the primary goal. Make them feel like they're learning something about the world. That is actually a direct quote from Chris McDowell about what he used when he made his backgrounds. I asked him, what should I think about? And he said, you should be learning something about the setting as you're rolling these characters. And the other thing it
Yeah.
does is it gives you a lot of leeway in describing how your character is unique. Like one person could play a half witch and be completely different than another person playing the same character, the same background. And so I had to make them vague enough to allow for that while also being specific enough to give them a sense of connection to the world. What I'm excited to see is people writing their own backgrounds, especially if you release like an adventure for Cairn, and then you just want to add like, here are 4 backgrounds for this adventure relevant to my
For the
setting.
setting,
It
yeah.
it gives you, to quote my friend Zdex Hugh, it gives you a sense of metatextual narrative. It's another surface in which to demonstrate the setting's unique vibes. And that's what I'm hoping folks use. And so I'm going to write in the
Yeah.
Warden's Guide, which is the companion book to this, I'm going to write here is how you write a background chapter that
Yeah,
tells
that's what's
people
gonna
how
ask.
to
Yeah.
do this. Yeah, it's one of the things I've actually already written it. I haven't like made it presentable, but it is, the Warden's Guide is about 60% done. So I just really need to finish it out, and how to create a dungeon, how to create a wilderness setting, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that's one of them, is how to write a good background. So yeah, that's what I'm really most excited about. And you can get weird with it. I mean, most of these backgrounds are pretty unusual. Like people keep looking to try to find, oh, what's the fighter? And I'll say, well, there's this one guy you could be who hunts witches, kind of, or there's
Yeah.
this other character that protects the fields from monsters that come out of the woods. Like there's no exact. So I'm sure people will write
Yeah.
traditional background classes like, oh well, knight or something, and go ahead and do that. That bores me. But I yeah, I'm
Whatever
excited to see what
works
people.
for the person. Yeah.
Sure. Oh,
And
for sure. But the
yeah.
reason I didn't do it is I don't want
Yeah.
to
You want to
work
give
within
more to
those.
the people. You want to
Well,
give
it's
more
like
because they can come up with fighter very easily. You want to give
right,
something that
exactly.
people wouldn't be able to come
Right.
up, that simply,
Right. And to
Yeah.
that point, I tried to change the names. Like some of the names of the backgrounds here are quite silly. Like um Jongleur, is kind of a jester, but not exactly. And I either want someone to see the word and never have heard of it, and then look up the word's meaning and it's just some archaic meaning, or they have some association with it, and then when they get in there, it's different than what they thought. Because I don't want people to play tropes. I know that's what people want. I don't care. I want it to be
Yeah.
more interesting than that. So, and like, as you said, I'm sure someone will release a classic backgrounds for
Yeah.
Cairn 2E, and that's
What do
totally
you mean?
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exciting. You know what? Whatever gets
Yeah.
more people in the hobby. So,
Yeah. I remember when I released my first game, Sharp Sword and Sinister Spells, which is
mm-hmm,
a sword and sorcery game. It's not
mm-hmm.
a genre fantasy game. And I remember I would get frustrated when I saw people just playing, hey, I'm a dwarf, I'm an elf, let's go kill some orcs or something like this. And I was, no, the game is not about this. And the second edition now has a chapter explaining sword and sorcery, giving like some pointers how to make
Right.
this. But it's their game, and I love what you did with backgrounds. Watching these courses, there is this course on game design with Will Wright, who makes SimCity, them Sims. And one thing that
Yes.
he says that you can make games that give people a space to create their own things, so they can organize a community around it, and then they make the game their own. So they create communities, hierarchy, so they can start creating these backgrounds. And if you
Mm-hmm.
give them tools to make that, uh, creates a lot more connectivity and interaction with the game, right? You're giving them an opportunity to craft something, and I think that's something a lot of people miss, and we should try to make more of RPGs, instead of always selling them stuff, but selling them stuff that can create their own things with, right?
Right. Giving them the tools to create
Yeah.
the kinds of things they want to experience. That's interesting because you mentioned Will Wright. Um, I heard a story about him. I don't know if this is true, but this is what I heard.
Yeah.
That when he was 16, he participated in a drive across the country, across the United States, and he won by driving only at night and using night vision goggles.
Yeah.
and and so it's totally exactly what you just described. Like it's totally what you just described, but
Yeah.
it's
You
also
make your own
I
rules.
it's so but I'm not making this up. I have absolutely read that he said he did this. I'm gonna look it up later, and
That's
I don't
genius.
believe it's
Yeah.
apocryphal, but yeah,
I
it's
hope it's true. Yeah.
he also had like a robot arm for a while. He like broke his arm skiing once, and so
Oh
he
yeah.
designed this like robotic arm. He's such a those old. I mean, those guys. I
Yeah.
played a lot of his games. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing I want to ask you too is what are your favorite weird games that you've played? Like do you play video games? Do you only play RPGs? No, you play RPGs and board games, of course. But like, do you play other kind of games? And do you have any
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
weird ones?
So I play a lot of video games, but less so after my kid was born. But it's starting to pick back up again, thankfully. Right now, I'm playing The Outer Wilds, which is actually just really relevant to what we were just talking about. In The Outer Wilds, you basically play an alien, but you're the humans are the aliens. You're just normal, but you play this like four-eyed creature that is a kind of astronaut in a sort of Western themed galaxy, and you fly this little ship around and land on planets and moons and stuff. And the ship is basically it's like a moon lander. Like it's very shitty. It gets destroyed like so easily. Like you can slightly miss your trajectory and hit something, and it'll just fall apart. But the game has no specific point to it. I mean, basically, you're flying around this galaxy, and every half an hour or so, the galaxy explodes and you die, and then you are
Oh,
reborn, and your character remembers what happened. You're in like a time loop, and so it's kind of
okay.
Groundhog Day a little bit. But you know you're in a time loop. Nobody else knows they're in a time loop, and you fly around. You're supposed to figure out why you're in a time loop and why the universe is being destroyed, but also you can just roast marshmallows sometimes and hang out. You can even doze off. Like it's just a very and there's no benefit to it. You can like go to a campfire. Like I one time I woke up from a loop after having flown into the sun, and I just walked over to this campfire and talked to this guy at the campfire and dozed off and made some marshmallows. And it was just that's what I did for that loop, you know?
Yeah.
And so the game is completely player directed. And I've been playing for the last. It came out on Nintendo Switch last week, but it's been out since 2019. So it's. I've been waiting to play it for a while, and I like those kinds of user directed games.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild is another one of those. Like Zelda, is very player directed, but there's definitely like a point to it. So it's not exactly the same. But yeah, the Outer Wilds I strongly recommend. I like all kinds of games. I find the most inspiration from games that have a mix of exploration and problem solving. So once again, Breath of the Wild is probably to me the most consistent example of that. You know, the idea is so brilliant. It's basically Zelda and Link failed in their attempts to stop the end of the world. Link dies and is put in a resurrection chamber, and 100 years later wakes up and is now exploring the world of his mistakes. And the bad
Wow.
guys have won. The bad guys are kind of in a stalemate, but you're basically exploring this world that's covered in monsters and trying to you meet people who are making their lives despite the monsters, and you can take all the time you need because you've been asleep for 100 years anyways. And there's so much exploration and discovery in it, and there's problem solving. To me, it's the most OSR video game ever made. Is that it
I gotta
really
get
does.
that.
Oh, it is the reason to get a Nintendo Switch. I think if Zelda
Uh,
did not exist, I think I wouldn't have one. But it's such an incredible experience. I always tell people there's 2 sales a year. Buy it for $44 or whatever. It will give you 60 to 100 hours of fun, and
yeah.
there's nothing else like it. Don't Google anything. Just play. That was my kind of coming back to video games. Was that is I had stopped playing since my kid was born, and then he was finally old enough where I thought,
Yeah, yeah.
we're
Basically,
gonna go on
same
this.
thing here. Same thing here.
Yeah, is your
Starting to
kids
get
brought you
back to
back?
video games. Yeah, I'm starting to
Yeah.
get back to video games because of the kid. Yeah.
What are you playing?
Well, we have a Nintendo Switch too. I
Mhm.
just have one game from Nintendo because Nintendo games are so expensive, and yeah,
They
as you
are.
said,
They are.
the sale is they sell it for $5 less, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not
Well,
really a
it's
sale,
actually
you know.
you're right. Although with Zelda, I will say I got it for $41. It's normally like 60, so it was still a lot of money.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I yeah, I agree with you. It's really annoying.
I
It's
want
really
to.
yeah.
I love Pokemon. I heard like Pokemon Arceus. It's fantastic game. I really want that, and I want to try Zelda. But yeah, it's a lot for we usually buy games in sale. So I bought the Marvel superheroes Lego,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
fantastic,
Yeah.
gigantic game, and I bought for like $10 or something.
Right. Those
And
those games often are pretty inexpensive. The Lego
yeah,
series, they're not all good, but some of them are. I
Star
definitely
Wars
think for
Legos, it's
yes,
great.
exactly. Those are good. Those are really good. I do think, despite the price, the amount of entertainment
Yeah,
you get from Zelda, like,
yeah,
I mean, I must have sunk 100 hours into it, which
yeah.
is saying something. A
I've
movie, costs
yeah,
$14 now or whatever,
yes,
and
yes,
I get
yes,
two
yeah,
hours
yeah.
from that, 3
Absolutely,
hours
yeah.
maybe. But then, wow, video games, it's like
Yeah.
if they're
Well,
good,
I
they give
buy
you
all
so much.
these books, and a lot of them I
Right,
haven't read yet, and they are basically
right,
the
ditto,
price of a game, right? So I have
right,
to overcome this block that I have to
yeah.
spend,
I,
money
I I don't. I think
because
you should
it's
keep the block. Just pay for Zelda. That's my
okay.
opinion.
Well, but what I'm thinking is that they have this pack that you buy, 2 tickets, so you can get 2 games, and it's a little bit cheaper. So that's my excuse. Oh, I can get Zelda and Pokemon
Right.
because I just got some money of RPGs. That's something I do. because RPGs is kind of, I have my day job, so the RPG money it's kind of extra. We
It's
used to
play
pay
money.
bills too,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, I when I get some extra that I didn't expect because I sold
right.
something that I wasn't expecting, I buy some presents. So I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I should get,
That happened to
yeah,
me earlier this year. Is I sell Cairn at cost in drive through RPG, and they lowered the price of printing, and I must have got the email but not really thought about what it meant, because my price was still set to like $3.04, but now I was making, without knowing, I was making like 15 cents of every sale. In 2 months, I had a couple $100 in there. I didn't
wow,
know.
yeah,
So I'm still pulling from that in drive through to buy stuff from
yeah,
drive. I'm still doing that from that
yeah,
original,
yeah, yeah,
like, quote unquote
yeah,
mistake. Yeah, and my wife always says, you could make something, you could make a little bit,
yeah,
but
yeah,
now
yeah.
with I have a Patreon, so I just use that money to buy stuff to review.
Yeah. I love this joke that a friend of mine, I don't know if you know about it, Jim Wampler from Mutant Crow Classics, from Spellburn. And I remember when I was starting to make games, and I remember he's saying that you too can earn $100 a year in the awesome RPG market.
Yeah, I think it is. There are some people who do this full time. There are
Oh
maybe
yeah,
a
of
hundred of
course.
them. There are very few.
Of course.
For every Chris McDowell, there's a million people who will just do it like
Yeah.
us. And that's I don't I love my job. I'm happy at my job. I enjoy doing RPGs for non-transactional work. I will say, it comes to a point where, for instance, with my Kickstarter, the reason I'm doing that is because I can't do that on my own. I can't buy
Yeah.
2,000 books and then sell them. So, and also, having a publisher who knows how books are printed in the way that you want them to be printed really makes a difference, and does
And
marketing
can
and all
help
that stuff.
you,
So,
yeah, and can help you reach even more people, even
totally. I
though
mean,
it's
for
being
sure.
sold after it's out there, and you're probably gonna still keep the PDF, for free. So if you they can reach stores in like the other side of the planet, and they will see that, and
Right.
they can go online and will get you a game for free,
Right.
because that's your goal, right? You gotta reach people,
As many
and
people
then
as
they can play
possible.
for
Right.
free. Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
with Cairn specifically, I'm going to release. So the box set will come out with a bunch of stuff in it. The player's guide, and I also hope, I have to talk to the publisher about this, but the warden's guide, both should always be available for free to download. And when the dust is settled, I will make print at cost versions of everything. What I'm hoping to do is have an add-on on the Kickstarter where basically you don't pay for the player's guide. Like, the player's guide comes in the box, but then if you want to add like 4 more players guide in addition to
Oh,
like give to your
awesome. Yeah.
players, that's just at cost. That's my goal. I want you to be able to click buy the box set for whatever it costs. It comes with a warden's guide, a player's guide, an adventure anthology, a GM screen, character sheets. I want that all to be in the box set. But if you want to add more players guides to give to your players, just click a button. It's another $2, $3 to
Awesome.
just get those extra ones. That has always been the plan. And the only issue is figuring out how to ship those. I haven't quite figured
Yeah.
that out yet, but because they're not going to go in the box, and that changes the calculus. But
Little bit.
anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the publisher's problem to figure out. Um,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
actually, you had him on here, Jarrett, creator of Space Penguin Inc., are the publisher,
Yeah.
and I'm really excited to work with them because Jarrett has been through everything. He
Yeah.
knows everything about RPG publishing. He probably has 500 plus credits in the RPG world. If there's
Jeez.
anyone who knows this
Yeah.
industry, it's him. And that's why I'm really glad to be working with him, because I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. I mean, I can write,
Yeah.
I can do all that,
Same
but
thing. Same thing. I'm all for the creative side. The production side, it's really stressful for me. And
hmm,
I remember with Cosmosaurus, we spent months, just back and forth with the printer. Like every week there was a new adjustment. I was like just going, I don't care. I won't print this anymore. Fuck this, you know, because if there's a problem, why don't you send everything at once? Why are you keeping me months doing adjustments every week? I can't do this. I'm just gonna give up, and it's a shame. But eventually it got in print. But it was like I can do this. I have to have someone do this for me because
Well,
my
you
first
had gone
instinct is to say, screw it. I don't want to print
through,
this
yeah,
anymore.
burn it down, yeah. You
Yeah.
you had Gontijo doing the layout though, so that's
Yeah.
I get
Well, but I mean,
his. I mean, I'm
yeah.
saying that is a huge leg up right there.
Yeah.
That's
But
like,
he's super busy too. So this is small
oh, okay,
adjustments he couldn't be
okay.
making it. So,
I
it was
see.
up to
But
us,
still, it's like having Superman on your side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have an extra talent because you can draw, and that's, I can't draw. I can only write. That's my only ability is writing, maybe. And you're out there. I'm gonna write and illustrate, and I think that,
I do the
it's
layout too.
impressive.
It's not like Gontijo.
Right.
I'm not like a master layout like this, but I'm
And
quite
I as
proud of
well.
Fire and Fangs, which is
Hmm.
my adaptation of Primal Quest for SC.
Yes.
It has a cool layout. It's not as bold as Gontijo, but
I'm not saying you
it's
can't
well
do it. I'm just saying
organized and stuff. Yeah,
he is like
yeah,
God
yeah,
tier or whatever.
yeah,
He is really
yeah, yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
Um, uh,
If I could, I would always work with him. But since he's so good,
so
everybody wants
yeah,
to
it
work with
wants
him.
them.
So
Yeah, good.
yeah,
You know what? There's this concept in Hebrew where you are happy for another person without any
yeah.
jealousy. And like
Oh
that's
yeah,
how, like, he's so good. Like, I'm so happy he has all that
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
success. And he deserves it. You also worked with Lucas, Polish guy.
Lukasz Kowalczyk. Yeah,
You know how to say his name.
yeah, yeah.
Wait, is he Polish?
I
Was I
don't
right
know.
about
I tried. We just interviewed him last week, and
Oh, I
I
didn't hear. I
tried.
haven't listened to it yet. Yeah.
It sounds similar to Lukasz Kowalczyk,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it has no
Pretty
only
good.
people who speak
That's
Polish
pretty good.
can
Yeah.
can say it. But yeah,
Well,
he's
his
fantastic.
art is so good. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah.
I'm excited to listen. I haven't heard that one yet. I'm usually a
It's
few
not
weeks
out yet.
behind.
It's gonna be
Oh, okay. That's why.
probably
I see.
Tuesday or tomorrow or Tuesday.
It's
Depends if I can make my
the
computer
time.
here collaborate with me
Yeah, I
because
feel you. Doing it every week is
my
hard.
my hard drive just my external hard drive just died, so it's
Did you lose stuff or is it recoverable?
it's on Google Cloud, but I
Okay.
used to work on a lot of it, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna add it.
The problem.
Yeah, almost lost it, but yeah, it's in
Yeah.
there.
Good, good. No, I only asked because I used to do data recovery. So if you ever need help with that, let me know.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
so yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Now I was gonna say that we're gonna go for more personal parts of
Sure.
the questions, talking about
Okay.
more like beliefs, experience, and kind of stuff. And I want to first of all want to ask you how has your year been? Has it been a good year, weirdly good or weirdly bad? How have you been in this
20.
2023?
I think it's been pretty good. My wife had a lot of personal life stuff happening, sickness and death in her family, and so I spent a lot of time with my kid, like a lot. And she also got a new job, which took her out of town a lot and still does. So I've been spending a lot more time with my son, which has been very positive. And but previously I was parenting is exhausting, and
Yes,
I think
yes,
it's hard to see the beautiful parts when you're tired. And we had a lot of issues around sleep for
for
many years, and
sure.
that's gotten better. So now I'm finally cogent enough to look at my situation and realize how lucky I am in almost every aspect. I had a chronic health issue that just went away. Not just went away. I went and got it. I had it for almost a year, and then I had it. It took a long time, but we figured out what it was and we fixed it. And that was incredible to have that experience and to feel healthy after feeling not healthy for so long. And I
Yeah,
had this conversation a few days ago with my friend Jason Tachi. Um, he who I see as extremely productive and brilliant. He always asks, "How do you do it? How do you do the kid and the RPG design and stuff?" And I would ask him the same question, but what I told him was, you just ask for the time that you need, and then hopefully you're lucky enough to be with someone who can give it to you. And I am lucky enough where I can say, "Hey, I need to record or edit or write for 2 hours on this day," and just try to get it done in the time that you have. And if you don't, then be okay failing. Be okay trying and failing. And that's one lesson I've really felt strongly about this year. On the other hand, it is a weird year. I'm Israeli, and um,
Yeah.
it's very hard for me to right now. First it was very hard because of the attacks, and now it's very hard because I'm very opposed to the invasion of Gaza, and that has been um, really upsetting, and very isolating because I am pretty alone in that respect in my family, like even amongst my more left wing family members and friends. When I, from the beginning, would say, what do you think this is going to solve? How is this going to solve anything? Whatever. I have not changed how I felt, and I've only, in my opinion, been proven right about how things have unfolded, and it's really sucks that I just had my cousin here visiting. She is Israeli, but she lives in New York. She was visiting yesterday, and I asked her, "What? How do you talk to your family?" And she said, "I just don't." Like that's her way of dealing with it. And we have a family WhatsApp, and I just
Yeah.
have it muted for the first time in 10 years. I have it muted because I can't deal with it. And on the other hand, a lot of people who I know and like say pretty ignorant things. And one guy who I like
Yeah.
online, he made a comment, a creator. He said like, "Oh, Israeli creators should be taken to task and asked publicly about how they feel." I am anti the invasion and very much on the far left in Israel, and I still do not want to talk to people in the RPG world. This is my own space where I don't have to think about the horror.
Yeah.
I think about literally every
Yeah.
single day. It's like you were
Yeah.
talking about living in a city at war. I'm sure that's a big part of your thoughts. It doesn't mean you necessarily want to have it in your
Yeah.
game life. And I'm not saying I'm not one of those no politics in gaming guys. No, everything is politics, but I get to
Yeah.
choose. I already focus on
Yeah.
the Holocaust and Israel and Gaza every single day. I want to be able
Yeah.
to not do that. And I remember this guy on Reddit, some person posted, "Oh, here's a bunch of people who we need to hear their opinions about the invasion of Gaza because I don't want to support them." And it's like, "F you, buddy." Like I happen to be, in my opinion, on the right side of history here, and yet I don't want to talk about it when I don't want to talk about it because it's extremely
Yeah.
emotional, and nothing I can do can change the reality of it.
Yeah.
I already do everything other than literally volunteering my life and giving up my family to go and try to fix the situation. There's nothing else I can do. I vote for the
And
right
if you
people. I
do that,
support the right
even
things.
if
It's
you do
like,
that, yeah.
right.
Even
This whole idea that people, and on the other hand, I totally support folks who don't want to support certain authors. Obviously, if you're a
yeah.
freaking fascist asshole, I don't want to support you, and I won't support you. If other people want to, that's their business. But it doesn't mean that person, if you don't like it's not like I'm going to go, "What are Gavin Norman's politics? I need to know." No, that's not how it works. But if someone makes those things publicly
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah.
then that's their choice, whatever. But I'm
Yeah.
very frustrated by this, especially among my friends on the left. I'm very left wing. It doesn't mean that I necessarily want to participate in every
Yeah.
political action that they have, And I actually, interestingly, I have a Brazilian friend I mentioned earlier, Mateo. He and I got in this argument once. He's the guy who made Spellburns and Battle Scars, which is a DCC hack of Cairn. But it's very DCC, but it's for Cairn. He and I got in this big argument once. That's all we ever do is argue. But he got in this big argument with me about where he doesn't like when I say, if I see if I see no politics on a forum or in a game, that to me is a red flag. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean no politics. It means no politics I don't agree with. And he
Because
was saying,
everything's politics. Art.
exactly,
Art is
exactly,
expression. It you
right.
cannot not infuse it with your thoughts and your beliefs and your values, and that's politics.
I completely agree. And I don't think Mateo disagreed, but I do think he believed that saying no politics, he believed that in people who are suffering on a daily basis, they do want an escape from that, and sometimes saying that means let's keep it chill. And I don't disagree. His argument was it's very American to perceive things that way. I think it's just in the English speaking world saying no politics has that red flag connotation.
Here
So
too.
that's
Same thing
you.
here.
So do you think? So for instance, if someone is a
We have the
right
same
wing guy, would
same
they say that
problem in
there?
the Brazilian RPG community. We have the same problem that all the communities that says no politics here are all communities controlled by people in the right wing, and they say
Right,
they don't do politics, but they post homophobic memes. They
right,
post uh, sexism and stuff
right.
because it's not politics. It's
Because
just
that's
jokes.
yeah. Right, right.
Yeah,
No politics means no politics I don't agree with. It's like
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
means my politics only.
For them is that no if it's explicitly politically, if it's we're talking about anti-capitalism, that's politics. But if you just infuse the systemic oppression that is almost naturalized for everyone, it's there, it's natural. I don't care, they don't realize it's part of everyday
Right,
life. Like as you said
right,
here, it's a war. So we hear shots, we hear people shooting each other. We still go out to buy bread. It's
right,
normalized for us. It's normal. It's
right,
not. I hear
right,
people on Facebook. I have a friend say, "Oh, I heard a shot here in my city. I'm so scared." And I was like,
right.
"I hear shots
What?
every day,
Right,
like every
right,
day. But
right.
it's not
Yeah.
normal for us. It's normal, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. I
So
agree. Yeah, it's
yeah,
totally. It's like in Israel, there's this weird sense of normalcy when it's like literally any day,
yeah,
justified or not, rockets could fall on your house,
yeah.
and it's so it shouldn't be okay. And
Shouldn't be. Yeah.
um, I have one friend who moved back to the United States after the recent attacks because he realized, yeah, we've been pretending that there isn't a war happening for 70 years. Um, Even in my, I live in a very safe place, very lucky to be here, but we have a lot of school shootings in the United States, and my kid had his
Yeah.
first shooter drill at school the other day, and it shouldn't be that way. I talked to my Canadian
That's
friends
not
who would say, that's
normal.
crazy,
That's not
that's
normal.
crazy,
That's not
you should
normal.
not have
That's
that,
not normal.
it's
Yeah.
and like it's
But we
pretty
treat it as it is, and
right,
it's
right.
not.
It shouldn't be, and
I
I think
think it's the same thing from politics. Like
right,
this oppressive, that's terrible conservative stuff that we're trying to change. For them, it's so normal that putting
right.
that in the game, it's not politics. That's just
Well,
how things are.
that's the privilege of being privileged, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like I have like very, like middle class white men who I know who they don't understand. Why don't you just work hard? That's what I did. They don't see the connections that their dad's friends with the owner of the business that they got a job out of high school. Or
It's
they don't
terrible.
see those connections. That's the privilege of privilege. And
Yeah.
and even when you think you're enlightened or whatever, I still every day I said something. Yesterday I said something to someone that I regret saying. I I was at this restaurant, and out of nowhere, this worker who I've never spoken to said, "Hey, I met someone who knows you, and they told me about your Kickstarter. I play Pathfinder, but I've never done OSR, and I thought it was interesting." And this person was very presented very queer, like was definitely I believe a trans man, and very nice guy. And I said, "Oh yeah, I was, I'm really surprised, whatever, whatever." And then I said, "Let me go get you a copy of the book." And I went and got Cairn from I always keep a copy in my car, and I brought him one and gave him
Yeah.
the game, and he said, "Thank you." And I said, I really feel bad about saying this, but it's what I thought. I said, "I love playing for members of the queer community. I find them to be the most interesting people to play with. They don't bring all this baggage." And then I realized later, he probably didn't need to be reminded of that,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
like all I
But
was
I
trying
would
to
do.
say is
Yeah.
is I
Yeah.
love playing with basically non traditional people, like people who aren't always in the hobby. But
Yeah.
all I did was other him in that scenario, and I regret it. And I decided yesterday. This happened yesterday, and I was going to bed, and I couldn't keep. I was reading this classic module, and I couldn't focus, and I realized it's because I felt some shame. I did something very
Yeah.
privileged, and so I decided next time I go there, I'm going to apologize for it. And I'm sure he'll say like, "Oh, it was fine," but I still feel really bad
Yeah.
about it. And so every day it happens, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. We're learning. Like we're work in progress. Because even though we realize that we are products of an era that those things were, being weird wasn't accepted. Like I recently discovered I have autism, and I've suffered. I was abused as a kid, and it's something that we're learning to do. Even if this, my parents, my father is really homophobic, and I grew up listening to this stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Does he?
and
How does he handle your autism? Have you talked to him about your diagnosis? Like,
I mean,
how does he handle it?
as much as I can talk to my father. My father is really into sports, So there is this
Ah,
football team here in Brazil. That's basically all he cares about.
ah.
He watches games from kids to senior players and
Hmm.
and and, and
And that's the
everything
only way
about
you
this
can
team.
connect to him. You have to that's like the path. That's the bridge that you have
Yeah,
to be in the. Do you have to be
yeah.
in this football in order to talk to him?
Yeah, it's hard too because if he was in America, he would be a Trump supporter. He got
Right.
sucked into YouTube and WhatsApp and all this
Yep.
fake news.
Yep.
And he there is a great documentary on YouTube called uh, "The Brainwashing of My Father" or something.
Oh,
That's
how
that's
I lost
about
my father to Fox News or something. I know what you're talking about. I know.
yeah, yeah.
Um.
But it's the same process in Brazil. So he can't concentrate in movies anymore. He can't concentrate on TV series. He watches fast content and is always driven by by anger, by
Right.
being.
Yeah.
Those are the enemies. This is the
Right.
problem, and
Yeah. It's the
sometimes I
same
have a
here
hard time
with many people.
connecting connecting with my father about this.
That sucks.
My
That
my
sucks.
mother in particular, she couldn't accept it when my kid was diagnosed. She said, "Oh, but he's just like you." That's the fucking point. And
Wait a minute. How could he have it too? He's just
exactly, uh,
yeah, it's amazing how blind they are and how blind we
yeah,
are. And we,
yeah,
yeah, I'm lucky. I have never been diagnosed with any kind of neurological um, condition or any kind of neurodivergence. But I am obviously surrounded by folks. My best friend has ADHD, and um, he was diagnosed in his 40s, and learning, oh, this is why I did this and couldn't understand, and now
yeah,
he has treatment, and it's like
yeah,
so much better for him, and I can actually help him because I will say, you're fixating, let's stop, like, because
yeah,
he'll do this thing where he will not
yes,
let a thread go, and it's not like he's angry, he just can't stop, he just can't, and I'll
yeah,
point it out,
yeah,
and then he'll say, oh, okay, okay, and he'll
yeah,
still try a little bit, and he's one of my
yeah. My
players, so
my
it
wife
happens a
helps
lot.
me get pulled out of stuff. For example, Friday I had to go to the therapist to like receive the final, diagnosis in the paper and everything. And it was that day that my external hard drive died.
Hailed?
So I
Oh
was
yeah.
fixating and trying to fix this, and I wouldn't do anything. I was hunched here in the computer trying different things, and the time was coming up, and we weren't ready. And then she came, "Oh, do you want to cancel? What do you want to do? I know you're fixating on this." And that
Hmm.
kind of helped me get out of my
Pull
head
out.
and get
Yeah.
back here and do what you have to do because I want to spend time with them too. I don't want to get sucked into my hyper focus
Yeah.
and stuff,
Yep.
which
Yep. Yeah.
is
You want
RPGs too. RPGs that are
our hyper
really
focus.
source, yeah, oh yeah. And
And
like in
yeah,
the
I
in the
guess.
early pandemic I
Go
was
ahead.
sucked into it.
Yeah.
I wrote
Ah.
5 games, but I neglected my family, my kid, myself, my health, and I have to really take care of not doing this. So
Yeah. I mean, I don't have autism, but I definitely see RPGs as a all the time thing that I have to be careful. Like, it is something that is always interesting to me, so I can always read about it, and so that means you
yeah,
really do have to, like. So here's a
take
couple
care,
tricks that I've done.
balance.
I don't bring my phone into my bedroom. Like, I go to bed at night, I keep the phone in the office, and that can be a problem sometimes because uh, we have a kid who has sleep issues, and sometimes, well, often my wife can't. She'll get woken up and she can't go to sleep, so she'll go sleep in the next room, and we need to communicate. And I don't have a phone, so she can't tell
Oh
me,
yeah,
"Hey, he woke up at this time." I just don't see it. But what it does do is it lets me uh, sit in my room and then not feel the pull of what's going on in Discord, what's going on online. I
yeah,
I can just read the book, and it took maybe a few months for it to adjust. But keeping a phone in my office instead of my bedroom has been a huge help for me on focus. For me,
Yeah, for sure. I try to do that too, especially when I'm spending time with the kid and the wife.
Yeah.
Just leave the phone somewhere else,
Yes.
because it's very easy for like something, they go to the bathroom or something and you pick up
And
the
then you
phone to check something
totally.
and you
Oh,
get sucked.
100%.
So yeah,
I
yeah,
it's some funny you said that because last night after my kid went to sleep, my wife and I played this board game called Castle Panic, and she got up to go to the bathroom, and I remember thinking normally I would just go look at my phone while she was in the bathroom waiting,
yeah,
and I didn't do it. But you're
yeah.
totally right. It happens. It's amazing how this
Very
thing didn't
fast. It's
exist,
very
and then
fast. Yeah,
it took over our lives.
it is. It did. Something I like to ask people here too is about maybe weird experience you might have had with altered states of awareness. So,
Hmm.
have you ever had any experience with this, being either
uh,
through meditation, hypnosis, or psychedelics, or
yeah,
dreams, anything that's made you
yeah.
see reality in a
Um,
new light?
yes to all those things, but the one that I will tell
Okay.
is I had a dream once that I could time travel into my own body, but only in my own life. So like I could go into when I was 8 years old and look at the world through my own eyes. And I
Mm.
remember in this dream, I I a lot of my childhood is not easy, was not easy for me, and so I don't really think about it much. And so that area is sort of forgotten, but also it's untouched by retrieval. It's not modified by my own perceptions. So when I do get reminded, I think I'm reminded of a very accurate version or closer to accurate than it would be if I thought about it all the time. And in this dream, I went back in time and I was in this. It was in the first house we lived in after we moved to the United States of America. And I remember in the dream, it was a distinct memory of when my brother smashed. I had some Legos and he smashed them, and I was very mad at him. And I saw myself with my adult brain, and I saw my parents with my adult brain, and I felt so much empathy for them through that memory that I woke up and I was crying. It was such a emotional experience because I was able, it was like you said, could you, if I had the ability to go and not relive, but just view events as they happened from my own mind now, I think it would do so much
Oh yeah.
for my sense of self, for teaching myself. I think about, they have that Apple thing, the Vision Pro, which you can sit at a party with this ridiculous thing on your head, but you can record basically an experience like you were there. In like 30 years, there are going to be kids who can fully relive all of their
Their
childhood
memories.
experiences,
Oh yeah.
and they will see it for as it is, not as their version of it. They'll see it for as it
That's
is. Yes,
true. Yeah.
they'll probably edit it and change it up a little bit and try to, oh, this is what I was like. But no, the truth is, if you go back and look and you see your experiences, first off, your own view of the world is almost always wrong. You know,
Yeah.
we as you said, we see
Well,
reflections
I
of
wouldn't
ourselves,
say
right?
wrong, but we can only see the world through an angle, and
Right.
that's why the empathy and the experience of other people are so important, because through then you can kind of try to see the world from other angles and have a more complete picture of this weird experience we're having.
Right.
It's not
From
that
another
it's wrong, but
perspective,
it's our
you're
reality. But
right.
the other realities are also true. It's not yours is not the only valid one. I
But
think that's the secret.
also as you tell you, so the problem with memories is that they are not to be
Yeah,
trusted.
yeah.
As
They
you
are
tell
altered.
yourself,
Yeah,
I have memories of things that I don't remember if they actually happened, or
yeah,
if I've told the story of them happening so much they've altered that memory to it's like
yeah.
you can't trust. And there's this book by Nabokov, Speak Memory, and it's about his experiences as a child growing up speaking four languages. This guy is like very worldly, and wrote Lolita. He's very famous for that. But this book is all about his own memories as a I think he was probably a genius is my guess, but his memories are so well thought out that they either can't possibly be true, or he's told himself the story of them so much that they might as well be true because they have that much impact on his personality. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I think about that a lot. Like if I could go and look at my own experience, even from 2 weeks ago, I would realize, you know what,
True.
I was in a weird state, because your emotional state impacts how you perceive things, as well as your beliefs and your feelings and your nervous system. And so I think there could be no more valuable technology for me than the ability to perceive myself through the eyes of others throughout my life. What an incredible experience that would be. And it is almost certainly going to be a completely normal thing in the next half century. And that's mind blowing to me. You know,
Yeah,
you're going to be able
that's
to
gonna
take
change.
like
Yeah, a lot.
like I think even stuff we've done now, like I think you'll be able to upload videos from when your kid was 10, or he'll be able to do it or whatever from when he's a kid, and then he'll be able to look at reconstructions of his entire life just from videos and photos, because they'll use, you know, AI to stitch it together or whatever.
Yeah,
And maybe it'll be wrong sometimes, but it'll feel real. Anyways,
yeah,
heady
and
stuff.
that's what reality is that what we feel is real, right? Because we will never have a complete picture of what's going on. So I think that will help a lot. And even for ourselves, like, as you said, like we're able to see your parents with your adult mind, so we have more empathy. We know more about what's going on, maybe what they're going through, because we're going through it ourselves. uh yeah,
Yeah,
that's sounds.
there's a like the my favorite current author is Ted Chiang. He's a science fiction author. It's Chiang. He is the one who wrote the novella that later became the movie. Shoot, what did they change the name of the movie to? Oh, I forgot it. The guy who directed Dune also directed this movie.
Oh,
Um, it's about alien languages, but he wrote a book called uh, shoot, I forget the name of the actual collection, but
yeah,
he
I
has a
know.
short.
The movie is the one that those ships that come and they try to
Correct,
communicate,
correct.
send
Yes,
symbols.
right,
Yeah, I
right.
want to
The
see that
story.
movie, but I
It,
can't forget. I can't remember the name of the movie. I really want
well,
to see that.
the name of the story is "Stories of Your Life." That's the name of the short story of the novella that it's based off of, "Stories of Your Life." Um,
Okay.
but I don't. I now don't. I feel bad. I don't remember.
Yeah,
Anyways,
we can search
it's a
afterwards.
great.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a great movie, but in
yeah.
one of his other short stories that he's less known for, it is basically about the story is from the perspective of a journalist in like the 2030s, 2040s, and basically in the future people choose to live stream their views of the world, like their experiences. So you just turn a button on, and then literally every experience you have, people can tune in like it's a channel. And it's about this journalist talking about the technology, and he's talking about how he and his daughter had this huge falling out, and then he goes and watches her version of their conversations from when she was in high school, and he sees that he was in the wrong completely about all their conversations, that he was totally, everything he believes about how their breakup, he's wrong. It's his daughter was right, and her
Yeah.
perspectives proves it. And it's about how this technology basically makes it so you can see how so frequently you're wrong. And I know we're just belaboring that point, but it's a
Yeah.
great short story by Ted
It's a
Chiang.
great point. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah,
point. I'll look
really
into that
recommend
for
him though.
sure. Yeah,
He
yeah,
is his stuff is so good, and it's probably been translated, but you can read the English, and it's his
yeah.
all his stuff is so
If I
good.
can, I try to read in the English the author wrote, because that's the real intentions, the choice of words. I think those things really matter. So I try to that. Some stuff I can't because it's in Russian, and it's German or something like this. But if it is in English, I will try to read in English.
Yeah, the movie
You
is
hi-
Arrival, by the way. Arrival. That's what it's called.
Arrival. Yeah, that's right. Arrival. Yeah. Yochai, do you are Jewish? Do you follow the religion, or do you have any other religion, or any kind of spirituality or philosophy that helps you, live through life or guide you through difficult moments?
Yeah, I
Can
would.
you talk to
So
us about it a little
sure,
bit?
yeah. So as my father says, my father is a hardcore atheist. But as he said, God doesn't care whether you believe in him or not. My connection with so Jews are an ethnic group as well as a religion, and this
Yeah.
confuses people a lot. I've had people not; they just don't understand. But it is true
There's
because
a
we're
lot of
matrilineal.
atheistic Jewish people out there, right?
I would say the
As I
majority.
hear, yeah,
My cousin, my mother's
stand-up
first cousin, is a
comedians. There's a
rabbi
lot of
who's an atheist.
yeah, a
Say
lot
what
of
was that?
stand-up comedians are a lot of stand-up comedians
Jews?
are Jewish,
Oh,
and
yeah,
a lot of them
totally.
are atheists. They always
Atheists.
say
I,
that.
I
Yeah,
I would say the majority of Jews are atheists. I would not even like I would say with the exception of the extreme religious, most people who identify as being Jewish are don't believe or are agnostic maybe. It's not what it's about. It's about a set of cultural traditions and for me as an Israeli, I don't have the same sense of loss that a lot of Jews have in the United States and other elsewhere. I'm not part of a diaspora. I'm part of a country, so I don't have the same. I need to connect to my Jewishness. I am Jewish, and but what I do feel a need to is to connect to my ancestors. So I have a lot of things that I do where I read about not my own specific ancestors because there's a big black hole and it's impossible to trace back beyond a certain point, but for people, I really like learning about um, the experience of Jews throughout history because it's very interesting and there's a lot of it repeats a lot and it's really freaking old. It's almost 6,000 years old, you know? So as a Jew, I feel my way of connecting to my Jewishness is through my ancestors. On the other hand, I married a non-Jewish woman, and my son, who does understand Hebrew, he doesn't consider himself Jewish. He might later, but I'm not asking him to do that. I'm not asking him to get bar mitzvahed. I wasn't even bar mitzvahed. Um, so yeah,
wow,
I don't follow the religion. I do know a lot about the religion and read about the religion and try to be present, but there's a lot I don't know as well. It was always very important to my family that we understood who we were, even though we had left the country that we came from. My father kind of fell out of love with Zionism and um, felt
yeah,
that his kids, especially me, would have a hard time in such a homogenous place. Anyways, um, with respect to religion, I consider myself a Chan Buddhist. I'm a pretty big fan of the Chan philosophy of Buddhism, which is sort of an atheistic, philosophy centered version of Buddhism. It's one of those things where I see it as a useful explanation for reality. This idea that desire can cause suffering, so mitigating and understanding desire helps you diminish your own suffering, but also remembering that it's kind of impossible to escape from, and that's okay. And
yeah,
it's just a practice. I don't meditate as much as I should. It does help to meditate. I also think it's not for everyone, and there's no prescription. It's a text you can read and decide if you agree with some of it, and if you do, great. I mean, this whole idea in Buddhism of you know uh, Buddhism is the raft that carries you across the river, but when you get across the river, you can just get off the raft. It's only as important as it gets you somewhere that you want to be. Otherwise, it's not needed. And so I really appreciate that about Buddhism. I also really like a lot of existentialists. I have a hard time saying which one was the most influential, but I read a lot of Nietzsche, Sartre, Heidegger, um, kind of a wide spectrum. I also like Kant, and I also like various Chinese and Japanese philosophers, mostly related to Buddhism, but not all. Yeah, so I like all those things. There's a bit of nihilism mixed in there as well. So yeah, with respect to philosophy, I'm not, I'm not college educated. I don't have I just read what seems interesting, and if it's not interesting, I kind of
yeah,
toss it. Um, with respect to politics, I am um, very much a cooperativist. Like I believe in worker cooperatives and in cooperatives of all kinds. I founded two worker cooperatives, one purchasing cooperative, and I also live in a co-housing community that's very much on the same bent. Not exactly, but it's still very democratic in certain aspects. So I'm very much a believer of democracy in all levels. I work at a worker cooperative presently, and I also do some consulting to help other people who are interested in starting co-ops of very varying kinds. Like I like food co-ops and consumer co-ops, that sort of thing. I wish there was more of that in the RPG scene. I think we could really
That's what
do
I'm
those
gonna ask
things.
you. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
there's a
should
couple
try.
times
Yeah,
I've come in and talked to people who've asked me about it, and I think what people want is not that. I think they want cheaper books to be printed. They want to keep more of their sales. I think they want to work together. But I think there hasn't, to my mind, been any serious effort to make, for instance, a publishing cooperative. I've seen a few of these small groups that call themselves co-ops, and they do some stuff, but I think that's more just collectives. They're just people working together, and that's great. There's that what is it, the Good Sleep Collective, I think they're called, which is in Europe, which Emil Bovin is part of that, and I think Eco as well.
yeah,
The people who just kind of help each other. That's great. I don't believe cooperatives can succeed without massive economic power, and that's why worker
yeah,
co-ops are so important. In the U.S., there are very few. I usually ask people how many worker co-ops they think there are in the United States, and they say, "Oh, there's thousands." There are at most 400, at most, and we have a country of almost 400 million people, to give you an idea of the disparity. So, for me, cooperatives are a huge part of my life and very important to me. I don't see them nearly enough in any trade. I'd love to see, for example, a version of Mixam that was run like a purchasing cooperative, where, for instance, you could go and say, hey, I have 15 authors. They all only have small batches, but I want to print as if we were a bigger organization because we're going to give you all these sales. I've actually myself reached out to three separate print shops about whether this is a doable thing, and they've all told me it wasn't, for varying reasons. Either, oh, it's expensive to switch the job to a different product, so it doesn't really make sense for you to get that, or Mixam, they have a reseller program, but the numbers are so high and you barely get any margin, so what's the difference?
yeah,
So I've seen that. I haven't seen it yet be where I want it to be, but a kind of purchasing co-op, or a worker owned publishing house would be really cool. Like, Tuesday Night
yeah,
Games, but run by its workers, which, that's very small. Maybe Paizo, but run by its workers. So the opportunity is still out there. I don't think it's anyone's fault it hasn't happened. It's just not a very common
yeah.
conceit. People don't know about it. If anyone's listening to this and is interested in talking about worker co-ops, it's one of the
I
areas
am
I'm
for
actually,
sure. Yeah,
yeah, and
we
Brazil
should
has
make
a
a
number of
show
co-ops,
about it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's not. I always think that, but then I don't think people care. I think people, also
Oh,
at the end of the
people
day,
care. I think we do. I mean, we don't have to like make a podcast of 100 episodes, but we could, you know, a seminar about this because I'm pretty sure I don't understand really the major difference between a cooperative and in a collective, and what we should do to grow and to make it more viable. I have no idea, and I would love to learn more, and that could be
well,
something. Yeah,
especially outside the US, there's a lot of great models. For one, because cooperatives in the United States can be organized as limited liability companies, that gives them the ability to basically work in any state in the US, and therefore, print and sell their products. But also, they can have non-US members. LLCs can have. I can, for
yeah,
example, if I have an LLC, I can hire someone who doesn't live in the US and pay them in what's called a return, and they get basically patronage instead of a salary, meaning that they can get paid legally and not be a US citizen or have legal work visas here, which means you can have global cooperatives and
yeah,
kind of circumvent the limitations. There's also organizations like um, Open Collective is one. They're actually based in Central America. They are basically a bank for companies, especially cooperatives. I believe they're free for cooperatives, but they're basically a bank. They can interact with like PayPal on your behalf as a bank, and then you can have people in all these different countries who transparently can see the money going in and money going out of this collective account. There's a bunch of mechanisms in the world that can both help folks who don't have the benefit of being in the US or the UK sell their
yeah,
products without needing to go through some major corporation and signing away half your proceeds. So I would love to talk to people about that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a thing I actually know about.
We need this. We need this. We need this
Well, it's
for
out there.
sure.
People are doing it. People are
Yeah,
doing it. There's
yeah.
also that cool
I
Amanda.
would talk to you about maybe scheduling something, or even in your show between two characters, we should do something about it. Because
I would.
I wanna learn it, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people from South America wanna know about this, because that could make really life changing experiences for people here. I know because I have friends that even if like they publish just one zine or two zines and they're selling in dollars, the money they're getting, although it can be very small for someone in the USA, can be life changing for people here.
Right. Well, and the hard thing is people in Brazil, for instance, can't use like Kickstarter because there's
Yeah.
like limitations to how you can receive money. And um, Open Collective solves a lot of that stuff, and a lot of these kind of there are these organizations that exist to help specifically co-ops, but any kind of organizations that are trying to do things more equally and equitable. I will say this: if you build it, I will come. So if you
Well, I
organize
have to
something like
learn
that, I
from
will come.
you. I have to learn from someone to see
No, what I
how
mean is
we
if you
can
try to
do this. Yeah.
organize
Oh
what I mean
yeah,
is if you
yeah.
try to organize something, I'm happy to
Okay.
talk to people
Yeah.
about it if you find a bunch of Brazilians who are trying to find a specific solution to certain problems. But as I've noticed, not everyone, especially in the US, wants to do things that way. Like when I've tried to organize cooperatives here, there's just so many people who just don't get it. They just what's in it for me? They don't understand
Yeah. But I mean,
that. And
I never heard any long talk, any long conversation explaining what it is, what it can do for you, what it can do for others, what it can do for the community. I mean, we are talking about this here in the last 20 minutes of the show, and it's very superficial. I don't really know. I hear it can be very very helpful, but I don't know how to do it, how it can be viable, how we as a community could be and benefit from it. But if you have like a more calmer and longer version of this that we could sit down and talk slowly about this, I think it could be very productive for everyone. I think a lot of the community, even in the US, maybe there's people that would be interested. I think, I don't know, but it's something that we should try. If yeah,
I'm interested.
yeah. Okay, so last few questions. I'm already keeping you here for over 2 hours. So ghosts, aliens, supernatural stuff. Did you have any experience with this? Do you believe
None
it or
ever.
no?
I mean, I don't. I have never had any experience with any of those things. I wish. God, if you
Yeah.
listen, if you guys have a ghost, call me up. I will go there and meet that ghost. I would love for those things to
Yeah.
be true. I think humans are scary enough. I'm not saying I don't believe in aliens. I'm
Yeah,
sure
we
there's
are
other
the
civilizations,
monsters,
but
as
yeah,
your
right.
kid
As my
said. We
kid
are the
said, yeah.
monsters. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, but no, I've never had those experiences,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Superpowers. If you could choose any superpower to have, what would you choose, and what would be the first thing you would do with it?
Well, when I was younger, I always would say telekinesis because I'm lazy and I would just want to pick things up without having to move. But that's actually changed. I think depending on how limited you took it, like what limitations were, I think time travel would be one. And I would do exactly what I said earlier. I would go and look at my own life from the perspective of a grown up.
By the way, that could very well be like a journaling game, a time traveling game
Oh
that you
yeah,
time travel to periods of your own and you
you are
can
right.
relive it. That could be
Yeah,
a
that's a great
excellent
idea.
journaling game.
That's a
Yeah.
great idea. Well, you can. I read about this woman who took she took her high school notebooks and she wrote 20 of them, whatever, and she uploaded them to Chat GPT and then
Wow.
told it to pretend it was her, and then she had conversations with herself,
Conversation with herself.
and she
Wow.
said it made her weep that like she was able to see a version of
Probably.
herself,
Yeah.
a version from these journals, but um
Yeah. It is it's still her. It's her, but
it's
it's not. As that old, you can never cross a river two times because the river is not the
right.
same and you're not the same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic.
Well,
Weird thing in fiction or in books or in RPGs, in movies. It can be a faction, NPC, a power, or a location that you could make it to be real in our world. What would you choose and why?
yeah. I really like how in Star Trek they have replicators because they've eliminated scarcity. I think that's a pretty good. If you could just create
Yeah,
food and power, I think it would solve a lot of problems. Like I think the number one problem we have on this planet is logistics. Like we have all this food, but we just don't distribute it.
Yeah.
So that's my boring answer.
That's
On a
perfect
fantastic.
answer. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
That's a perfect
it's
answer.
not as it's not as gameable, I guess. But if
Well,
I
it
had to,
doesn't have to be. It's this part is more about knowing you, your values,
yeah,
things you believe. So you want people to suffer less, and
I,
that's the future one. The future I want is Star Trek.
right. Well,
It's everybody is united, everybody helps. We don't have to choose our outfits. We don't have to think about I'm dressing.
we
I'm
don't have to
dressing
choose
this.
our.
I'm ready. Let's go. That's
No,
perfect.
my favorite story about Star Trek is that when Patrick Stewart was getting set up to be Jean-Luc Picard on the Next Generation, when he was in the casting rooms, they had him wear a wig, and he's very bald, so they had him wearing a
Yeah,
wig, and
that's what I
and then
imagine now.
and then Gene Roddenberry came in and said, "Take off the wig." And the people there, the producers or whatever, said, "No, no, no, he has to wear a wig. There's no way in the future they won't have cured baldness." And then Gene Roddenberry said, "In the future, no one will care." And I
Yeah.
always loved that.
Yes.
I love that. That's the thing is like, that guy, I understand he was like a terror on set. That guy believed in a beautiful version of the future. It was naive, maybe a little bit privileged, but also I love this idea of a future where no one gives a shit that you're bald,
That's a great tattoo to write too. In the future, no one will cares because sometimes we care about stuff that it will not make any difference,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
future. Yeah. That's a great phrase. In the future, no one will cares. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Finally, do you remember the last time you felt really happy and grateful for being here and being alive and everything? And if you do, can you just share with us how it was? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, it actually happened really recently, but the one the memory that actually came to mind, last year I went to visit. Actually, shoot, this was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, my sister was a park ranger at this national park, and I went to go visit her, and she was having a really bad time for personal reasons. And my dad had broken his leg, but in traditional, like in his own way, he didn't go to the doctor. He came and visited like he was planning to. So he flew up to Washington from California. I flew from Massachusetts to Washington, drove 4 hours in a car, got to my sister's house in the middle of Olympia National Park, and I was sitting there with her in her house, and I was listening to my son and his grandfather play. And my father had a broken leg, so he was not happy, but he was still trying. And my sister was depressed about something. My wife was there, and they were all playing a game. I can't remember which one. And I was on the couch listening to them play, and I was thinking to myself, in 20 years, I will give anything to come back to this moment and be in my mind
yeah.
in this moment. It was a very emotional realization. Like,
Yeah.
so I wasn't even that happy at that moment. It was more just,
Grateful, right?
yeah, exactly. So that's the
Yeah.
one that comes to mind. Even though I felt very happy recently, all the time I'm happy, especially when I'm with my kid. But yeah, that moment was just that comes to mind.
Yeah, it's a great moment. I read about this today. I one of my practices read a Stoicism book every day, and one of the teachings today is that you know every moment could be the moments. You weren't doing anything special. You were just being there in the moments and seeing your father and your son, interacting and building and creating bonds, and that's very soon this won't be able to happen again because we all go through this, and you being able to stay there and enjoy that moment and see there and really soak it in and not get sucked by this devil machine that we carry. It's
Well, it was
fantastic.
also, yeah, it was also that I recognized, despite how unhappy my dad and my sister were, it was still a great moment. It's still, and it
Yeah.
wasn't, yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
Anyways,
it's another phrase that I love. It's not about position, it's about disposition. because we are going, as you said, we are going through stuff. But if you can be there in that moment, put those things there in our minds that are like making anxious and angry, and like I might have lost a lot of files. My can't work because of my hard drive. But I have to be here and have this talk to you and spend my time with my family and just enjoy being present. I think it's the secret. Just forget what is in your mind for the past and see the present for the value that it has.
Right.
And
Well,
and you
also you
being able
won't,
to do that, it's fantastic.
my
And
father would always say, you're not going to think about the $100 you had to spend today because of this situation. You're going to, in 10 years, you're not going to remember that. Some people
in the
do.
future, no one will care. In the
Yeah,
future,
right.
no one will
But
care. Yeah.
but even in the near future, like, if my kid has a birthday party and I'm stressed out about getting it happening or how much money it costs,
Yeah.
in 5 years, I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to think about his birthday party.
Exactly.
So like, it's like, I'm not saying don't care. I'm just saying don't focus on the crappy parts when you
Yeah.
don't need to.
Yeah.
When Jews get married, they break glass at the marriage. Have you ever seen this where Jews will step on a
Yeah.
glass?
Yeah.
The
I
real
have to be honest. I don't have many Jewish friends in Brazil. What I know about Jewish culture is from movies and like for entertainers that I love. I love comedy, so I have a
you
small
see a lot
glimpse
of
of this.
Jews. Yeah,
And but I find it so fascinating. I'm atheist too, but like the community and the traditions and how they talk to each other and this cultural thing, I kind of feel envy. I think it's so fascinating. It's so you have a community that's
without needing the
atheists.
religion.
We
Yeah,
we don't have atheists don't have a community. We don't have like, oh,
yeah,
let's hang out. That doesn't
yeah,
exist. And for me at least, as I get older, I realize that connections and community and being around people, it's it's the most important thing in life.
yeah.
And
Well, and
and
so
that's
I think
that's something that fascinates me about Jewish culture. I don't know how you feel about this. I don't know how true
no,
fiction
a
and
lot
pop
of people
culture
say
is
that.
about this. But
A
yeah,
lot of people say that. Oh, I envy your sense of connection. Like, I can go to any city and find other Jews, and they'll let me stay there. Like, that's a thing we do. That Jews I don't know have let me stay at their house because I'm a Jew. It's unfair. They should do it for all humanity, but it's just true.
yeah,
And
yeah,
many communities and cultures have those
that
kinds of
is
things.
true.
But I can connect if you're part of a Jewish group, even if it's not a religious one, you can always get by, wherever you are. And we look out for each other. On the other hand, well, the reason I mentioned the glass thing is that the reason we break the glass is that to remind you that even in your happiest moment, life will have sharp edges and
Yeah,
hard. And there's this very famous folk tale, Jewish folk tale, about Shlomo, King Solomon, and King Solomon, he had heard that there was this jeweler who was the greatest jeweler who ever lived, and his he asked the jeweler, I hear you're the best. Make me a ring that reminds me when I'm sad to be happy and when I'm happy to be sad, and I will let you have like all the jewels
oh
in the
yeah,
kingdom or whatever. He said, so can you make me a ring that reminds me of these things? And the jeweler made him a ring that said, this too shall pass.
yeah. My wife has
And
that tattooed on her
oh
wrist,
yeah, it's a
and
good, it's a good phrase.
yeah,
Gamza Yavol. It's like basically, so that way, whenever he was happy and he would look at it and think, but when he was sad, he would look at it and go, and um, and so I think that's a big part of the Jewish tradition is remembering that with every happiness there's sadness, and with every sadness there's happiness.
yeah,
But also, you were saying, you were envious. In the United States, at least, there is an organization that's kind of religious, but kind of not, called Unitarians. And they're basically, when Jews marry non-Jews, they often end up as Unitarians because um, they basically want the community, but they don't want the religion. And so Unitarians are kind of like a mixture of Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, but without any specific sacred texts. They're just kind of like, we get together and have lunch and talk about basic ethics. So they're kind of like, I've never been a member, I've never been part of it, but I have neighbors who that's what happened. There was a Jewish guy, not Jewish woman. They wanted their kids to have something, but the Jewish guy didn't want
Yeah.
to take them to temple, so they joined Unitarians, and so they have a church, but they don't believe in God, and they don't talk about God. It's just, and so that's kind of what Unitarianism has been. So I'm saying there are things out there.
Yeah.
I don't know if they work for you, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I'll try and look at it. For me, it's like Stoicism. It's kind of my religion, philosophy, and
Right.
I feel there's a lot of similarities with Buddhism as the things you say in the teachings. There's always something very similar. Like this too shall pass. It's something that's in the core center of Stoicism. And the initial idea was for me to get the tattoo, and my wife just jumped at the gun on me. But there's like two
She
phrases.
stole the idea from you.
Yeah. Now that's in the future, no one will care. It's another thing that I kind of want to tattoo. But the things that I wanted to do is this too shall pass, and on the other hand, put your ass where your heart wants to be. Because you want something, you gotta sit down and do the work, right?
Wow.
That's something
Put your
that I
ass
forget.
where your heart wants to be. That means like dress for the job that you want or whatever.
Well, kinda. It's like I want to make games, but I was like so tired and I couldn't do anything. It's actually a reminder for me that I have to do my art. If I want to make art, I have to actually sit down and do it, because sometimes tiresome and all these problems. I say, oh, I'm too tired. I'm not gonna do it. And for me, I realized that making art kind of helps me recover. It's kind of therapy. If I don't do it, it would get harder and harder for me to sit down and do it again. So for me, it's kind of a reminder to go there, forget everything, go there, sit down, and do what you want to do.
Right. Yeah. Don't keep up. I think a practice is important.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it keeps a byline of our lives. It's important to have. It's like me with my stupid diet and my exercising. It's just important
Yeah,
to have
it
a
is.
practice. It keeps you
It's
grounded.
it's an exercise for the soul, I think, to make art.
Hmm.
As I do with my normal exercise, I have to make art, otherwise I start feeling bad. So that's
right. It's
why
like if I don't do my back exercises in the morning, I'm gonna do something in the next week and I'll hurt my back. But if I exercise every day, I'll almost never hurt it. It's true. God, we're so old.
No, we're not old. We're wise. We're getting
wise.
wiser.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Old age 6.
Yeah. Yochai, that's was all the questions I had for you. I'm really so thank you for you being here. I think we had wonderful conversations, wonderful ideas, wonderful insights. I got this new phrase I want a tattoo now. In the future, no one will care. I love this. I love we are the monsters. I think this was an incredible episode. I'm so grateful for you. And
I can't believe the two takeaways from me are nihilism and we're the monster.
No, there's a lot of stuff like the idea of making a journaling game about time traveling in your own body.
That was your idea. Very good. Very good.
But it's from you. And I mean, I don't know.
No, that's
Star
that's
Trek
a great
is
idea.
the future I want. Because of the socialism, and then I have to think about clothes.
Vegetarian space communists. Yeah, there's a great what do they call it? Luxury. What is it? Something luxury. Oh, fully automated luxury communism. that's them. It's just like
that's the dream.
No, that's actually one of the hardest parts about writing for Star Trek, according to the writers, is that you can't have conflicts because there's no problems. So they had to invent what is maybe when they run into another civilization, and that civilization are like the Soviet Union, then they find some problems. But between the staff, it was really hard to create drama because everyone was just so great. It's hard.
Yeah. But they do it, and it's great.
It was good. It was good.
Yochai, do you have any last message for the weirdos out there that made it through 2 hours and a half of us just having fun and talking weird?
ridiculous. That's really if they're somehow still here. I'd say my biggest advice to other burgeoning creators is to just go for it. Don't worry about it. Just go for it. People will help you. Ask for it. It's really a very forgiving, creative atmosphere to be in. I had help every step of the way, and
you helped me a lot too. I have to say
with
thank
what?
you. Well, don't you remember that are coming, like the games I used it into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
odds, and
yeah.
like you
Sure,
read,
sure.
yeah. Oh, come on,
Oh,
you're so
sure.
welcome. You're
Yeah. I have all of those. I have all three on my shelf behind me. Um, yeah, I actually
thank you.
really what was the space one?
Screams Amongst the Stars.
Skins Must Start. I like that one. I ran a mothership module with it. Must have been it over a year ago. I really like your take on the stress and it's great. It's a good system. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talk. No, it's no. You
Yeah.
made 3 Into the Odd games
Yeah.
and nobody talks about it. That's interesting.
Well,
It's your
yeah.
fault. You don't promote it
Probably
enough.
because I can't focus too much on one game and I will rather jump to another one.
Yeah.
But I do have an idea for an adventure for it that kind of has to do with the time travel idea we have.
I love
and
it.
The idea is, oh, it's me again. So what is, you arrive at a space station to deliver a package. But once you deliver it, you realize that it has already been delivered for you by you yesterday.
Whoa.
You know.
That's great. You have lots of good ideas. That is a good one.
And then you have to figure out what is going on. And if you don't, you start showing up again. So next day you will show up again.
Wow.
And if you don't start connecting the dots, reality will start falling apart because different versions of you
you create paradoxes
are appearing.
That's great.
And the only way for you to find your original self and get out of this, if you repeat exactly what you did in the first day.
Originally, that's brilliant.
Yeah. The adventure
that would
be
actually, that would be a good
Go
board
ahead.
game too. That would be a good board game.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine some of it. Like, okay, you have, and it's going to be a mystery of what steps you did, each time.
Yes.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I like it.
Well,
great to have you on. No, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, Yochai, can you take us out saying the catchphrase of the show? Keep it weird, everybody.
I was practicing this.
Oh.
Well, do you want me to say the whole? Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Keep it weird, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Weird Games and Weirder People. If you'd like to keep up with the show, please subscribe to be notified when we release new episodes. If you'd like to support us, please leave a review or head on to code-fi.com/WGNWP. See you next time, and remember, weird is the new wonderful.